Good morning to everyone. My name is Dean Johnson, Chair of the Board of Regents, and on behalf of my colleagues and President Kaler, we're pleased to be here on the campus of the University of Minnesota, Duluth, and want to thank Chancellor Black and his entire staff for their hospitality over the last day, yesterday, and as well as last evening. We do have a full agenda here today, and one of the things we're going to do first is ceremonial, and that is the swearing in of 4 regents, 2 who are incumbents and 2 who are newly elected. And the order of the swearing in as they were elected would be Regent Swigum, Regent Rocha, Regent McMillan, and Regent Powell. And we are joined today by Judge Stauber from the Minnesota Court of Appeals. So, Judge, we would ask you to come forward to administer the oath of office, please. And thank you for being here.
It's going to make noise while I put it in my pocket
here. The judge comes with thundering sound.
So who's first up?
Regent Swigum, please.
Steve, it's good to see you. I think you're going to go this side, and I'm going to go this side. Is that okay? Okay, first, I get to make a policy speech here, since I've got the forum. My name's Larry Stauber. I'm from Proctor, Minnesota. Went to UMD, graduated, went into service, and when we came back, I chose to live back in Duluth, where I was a lawyer and public defender for many, many, many years before I went to the Court of Appeals about 9 years ago. And I still live in the district, live up in Grand Lake Township. You're probably familiar with that. But anyway, so we'll get started here, Steve. And you're going to follow my lead. And I think you've done something like this before. Okay?
When I got married.
Close. Okay. I, Stephen A. Swigum,
I, Stephen A. Swigum,
residing in Kenyon, Goodhue County,
residing in Kenyon, Goodhue County,
in the state of Minnesota,
do solemnly swear
that I will support the Constitution of the United States
that I will support the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of the state of Minnesota,
and the Constitution of the state of Minnesota,
and will faithfully discharge the duties of the office of Regent of the University of Minnesota to the best of my judgment and ability. So help me God. Congratulations.
Congratulations, Regent Swigum. Regent Rocha.
Darren, you've watched the protocol now, so it's going to be very easy for you, right?
I was watching YouTube when he was up here, so.
Okay. Repeat after me. I, Darren M. Rocha.
I, Darren M. Rocha.
Residing in Independence, Hennepin County.
Residing in Independence, Hennepin County.
In the state of Minnesota.
In the state of Minnesota.
Do solemnly swear.
Do solemnly swear.
That I will support the Constitution of the United States.
That I will support the Constitution of the United States.
And the Constitution of the state of Minnesota.
And the Constitution of the state of Minnesota.
And will faithfully discharge.
And will faithfully discharge.
The duties of the office.
The duties of the office.
Of Regent of the University of Minnesota.
Of Regent of the University of Minnesota.
To the best of my judgment.
To the best of my judgment.
And my ability.
And my ability.
So help me God.
So help me God.
Congratulations.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Congratulations, Regent Rocha. Regent McMillan, the hometown favorite.
Okay, you've seen the protocol now, so you should be able to handle it very well.
I hope so.
Repeat after me. I, David J. McMillan.
I, David J. McMillan.
Residing in Duluth, St. Louis County.
residing in Duluth, St. Louis County,
in the state of Minnesota,
in the state of Minnesota,
do solemnly swear
do solemnly swear
that I will support the Constitution of the United States
that I will support the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of the state of Minnesota,
and the Constitution of the state of Minnesota,
and will faithfully discharge
and will faithfully discharge
the duties of office of Regent
the duties of office of Regent
of the University of Minnesota
of the University of Minnesota
to the best of my judgment.
to the best of my judgment.
So help me God.
So help me God.
David, congratulations.
Judge Stauber.
Next is Regent Powell.
Repeat after me. I, Kendall J. Powell,
I, Kendall J. Powell,
residing in Golden Valley, Hennepin County, in the state of Minnesota.
residing in Golden Valley, Hennepin County, the state of Minnesota.
We call that the ring of knowledge,
Yes.
by the way. Do solemnly swear
Do solemnly swear
that I will support the Constitution
that I will support the Constitution
of the United States
of the United States
and the Constitution of the state of Minnesota,
and the Constitution of the state of Minnesota,
and will faithfully discharge
and will faithfully discharge
the duties of the office of Regent of the University of Minnesota
the duties of the office of Regent of the University of Minnesota
to the best of my judgment and ability.
to the best of my judgment and ability.
So help me God.
So help me God.
Congratulations.
Thank you very much.
Congratulations, Regent Powell.
Got it. Your spot right over here. Oh, you're done. You're done. Done. Okay. Who's next? We're done. We're done. We're done. Good. They indicate to me that they're done, and so I get to leave now. And thank you all for allowing me to do this.
Thank you very much, Judge Stauber. I now call the Board of Regents meeting to order. First on our agenda today is approval of the minutes. Is there a motion? Is there a motion?
Second.
It's been moved and second. Is there discussion? Moved and second. Done discussion. If not, all in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion prevailed. Mr. President, we look forward to your report.
Thank you, Chair Johnson. It's a pleasure to welcome our newest board members. Regent Powell, welcome. Regent Sviggum, welcome back. And to Regents Rocha and McMillan, congratulations on your reelection. Of course, we're meeting in Regent McMillan's backyard, and there's much to be proud of at UMD these days. A few examples stand out. Importantly, in undergraduate and graduate education, enrollment is up over last year. That's important. On the academic front, we celebrated just last month the grand opening of the Securian Learning Commons and Math Labs, which doubled UMD's capacity to teach and prepare 1,200 students each year in developmental math courses. It's part of our commitment to prepare the STEM workforce across the state, and it's a perfect example of philanthropy being translated into meeting the real needs of our students. Securian, a strong partner of the university, provided a $750,000 gift in honor of former CEO Bob Stinkler, a very proud UMD alum. Also, earlier this month, UMD's Bachelor of Social Work program was fully accredited. It's a hybrid program with intensive internship experience and will prepare strong leaders for residential treatment centers, mental health programs, child welfare, and school social work. The program has a special emphasis of working with the state's American Indian community. And of course, in athletics, the Bulldogs are responsive to this very knowledgeable ice hockey fan base here in Northeast Minnesota. For those of you who don't know, the men's team will play tonight in Fargo as the NCAA tournament begins, seeded first in the region and second seed in the nation after winning the National Collegiate Hockey Conference tournament. And the Bulldog women had a terrific season, led by Coach Mara Crowell, who, in her second season on the job, was named the NCAA Division I National Coach of the Year. National Coach of the Year, a great achievement. Her team qualified for the NCAA tournament for the first time since 2011. Congratulations to the coach and to athletic director Josh Burlow for his leadership. I had breakfast with Josh yesterday, and I said, "Good morning, Josh." And he said, "Do you know that across the country we've had the highest ranked combination of men's and women's hockey teams this year?" I said, "Good morning, Josh. How are you?" Very excited about your success. Thanks to Chancellor Black's steady and strategic leadership, UMD is on an upward trajectory that we all seek. But so is our entire system. We have a new and energetic chancellor in Morris with Michelle Baer, and we are closing in on naming a new chancellor for our Crookston campus. Later today, we'll hear from University of Minnesota Rochester Chancellor Limkuhl and Associate Provost Ropers Hillman about their important work on a system-wide strategic plan, and I look forward to that report. It aligns with our ongoing work in just about every way to improve and better communicate our commitment to Greater Minnesota. We already have a great impact in all 87 counties, including those that surround this campus. As I told the leaders of the business and civic community last night, besides developing the talent, leadership, and workforce for the 7-county Arrowhead region, UMD's economic impact adds up to more than $500 million a year. And all told, in the 7 surrounding counties, the University of Minnesota on all of our campus has more than 34,000 alumni, with more than 14,000 of them as UMD grads, working as doctors, nurses, teachers, engineers, civic officials, and community leaders. We've been telling that story of our statewide impact to members of the legislature over the past months, too, highlighting all we do through Extension, our research and outreach centers, our 1,700 healthcare affiliations across the state, the leadership of our nearly 300,000 alumni statewide, and the work of our system campuses. But as always, we can do better when it comes to attracting students from Greater Minnesota. And with that in mind, I'm very excited to announce today a new initiative that we will launch this fall in our College of Food, Agricultural, and Natural Resource Sciences, CFANS, on our Twin Cities campus. It's called the Land Grant Legacy Scholarship, and we envision it expanding to our system campuses and other undergraduate colleges on our Twin Cities campuses over time. The Land Grant Legacy Scholarship is designed to attract and retain more students from Greater Minnesota, a goal of mine, of this board, and of other stakeholders across the state. Long term, our goal is that the Land Grant Legacy Scholarship will be fully supported by philanthropy. This scholarship aligns with one of our Progress Card goals to serve Minnesota students, and is a continuation of our commitment to keep Minnesota's best and brightest students in the state. Unfortunately, Minnesota is a net exporter of college-bound talent. And as Minnesota's only public land-grant research institution, we have a special obligation to educate Minnesota students. We know that one of the key drivers of Greater Minnesota students' decisions to study out of state is related to finances. And this new scholarship will level the playing field financially and make the University of Minnesota, the premier research and teaching institution in the region, even more attractive to Minnesota students and families. For now, over the next 4 years, as new classes enter, the Land Grant Legacy Scholarship will provide $5,000 each to 25 incoming freshmen. Eventually, when fully implemented, that's a total of 100 Greater Minnesota students on Land Grant Legacy Scholarships after the initial 4 years of the initiative. The first cohort of the students will be enrolled in CFANS for the fall of 2017, and I'm thankful to CFANS Dean Brian Brewer for his work on this. The Land Grant Legacy Scholarship builds on other recent initiatives that underscore the university's commitment to its land grant mission and to keep our promise of affordable excellence. With this Land Grant Legacy Scholarship, we will also be promoting our world-class College of Food, Agriculture, and Natural Resources Sciences, a unit uniquely positioned to help our students and graduates address, among others, the environmental, food, bioproducts, water, and agriculture education grand challenges that we face. Let me turn to the legislative update. Both chambers announced their targets for higher education this week, and they fell short, far short, of our total request of $147 million. The Senate's proposed funding in the university now stands at less than $30 million. That includes $2 million, however, for the Natural Resources Research Institute here at UMD, important support, half of what we requested. Includes $4 million for cancer clinical trials in our MnDrive request, and the rest is for core mission operations, but that is short of what we need. The House Omnibus Bill includes even less for the university, $22 million, with nothing for our core mission, student success goals, or the Bell Museum. It does include $2 million for MnDrive, $14 million for health training, and $4 million for NRRI, as we requested. Of course, we have a long way to go before the end of the session in May, but we have work to do with our partners in the legislature. Mr. Chair and members of the board, we are in a new reality for state investment in higher ed, and this new normal will have long-term consequences. This will put increased pressure on this board and our administration to make tough choices in the months ahead. But as the session unfolds towards its conclusion, I urge you to join me and vigorously support the university's request at the Capitol. In closing, I think we all know how important the University of Minnesota is, Minnesota diploma is to those of us who have earned one or who have had a child who has earned one. But I don't think you could get the full measure of what it means to students and their families unless you experience what Regent Hsu and I did last Monday. Perhaps you saw this in the media, but we conducted a small, special commencement ceremony at East Cliff for Colin Brown, a senior in our Twin Cities College of Science and Engineering. A request came to my office in February from a friend of Colin's father, Ken, who is weeks away from dying from ALS. One of his final wishes was to see his son graduate from the U. We decided to make that happen. I was honored to be part of it and came away with an even deeper understanding of what earning a University of Minnesota degree means. We should not ever forget that. With that, Mr. Chair, I conclude my report.
Thank you, Mr. President, and thank you, Regent Hsu and Mr. President, for your sensitivity in the situation of conferring a degree on Colin Brown this past week. We appreciate it very much. Receive and file the reports. Please note that they are listed in our docket material this morning. A consent report. Is there a motion on the consent report this morning?
So moved.
Is moved. Is there a second? It's been moved and second. Discussion on the consent report. Is there discussion? If not, all in favor indicate by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion prevailed. We now turn to our student representatives to the board who will give their report this morning. Lauren Mitchell and Mike Kanaya forward to present their report to the Board of Regents and the President. Thank you very much for being here. Please proceed and please identify yourself.
Thank you, Chair Johnson, Regents, President Kaler. Thank you for inviting us here to speak today. While John is setting up, I'll introduce us. My name is Lauren Mitchell. I am the chair of the student representatives to the board, the president-elect of the graduate student body, and a PhD student in the Department of Psychology.
Chair Johnson, members of the board, Mr. President, my name is Mike Kenyanya. I serve as the student representative to the Board of Regents from Duluth, and I am a sophomore studying management information systems.
We're very pleased to be presenting this report to you this morning. Our three topics expand and develop the work of prior representatives to the board, and these are student mental health, collection of race and ethnicity data from students, and free speech.
The topics we will discuss have system-wide impact, and we ask the board to view them as such. The Twin Cities campus is not only our system's flagship campus, but also a world-class research institute. However, student leaders across the system have observed that the current Twin Cities first approach overlooks the system campuses at best and is outright disadvantageous at worst. The administrative makeup of our system also creates another challenge because administrators are often tasked with both Twin Cities and system roles. We do acknowledge that there is ongoing system strategic planning and are cautiously optimistic about it. However, we would be remiss not to ask the board to view the contents of this report and all others from a system-wide lens.
Our first priority topic is student mental health. We're in a unique position to address student mental health right now. Stigma is at an all-time low, and the university community has bought into the idea of student mental health as a prerequisite for academic success. We have 3 of the top psychology departments in the country on the Twin Cities campus, and we have a lot of expertise that we can draw on to help solve these serious problems. I've posted the 4 priorities from last year's student representatives report to the Regents, and would like to spend a little bit of time discussing the progress that's been made so far and where attention is needed. On the Twin Cities campus, we've made progress on the first point, providing additional sources of funding for student mental health services. The investments made last year have made a serious and valuable impact. My friend Jonathan is in the audience today. Last fall, he experienced a personal crisis and visited Boynton Mental Health for help. And he told me that the name badge on the woman that he met with indicated that counselor had been hired in August 2016. The fact that she was available to help is a direct result of the investments made last year. Many more students are getting the help that they need as a result of those investments, and we're very grateful. However, we haven't seen progress on points 2, 3, and 4 about developing comprehensive system-wide strategy and campus-specific plans. Demand is increasing. It's been increasing every year for the past 10 years, and we don't have a good reason to expect that it will stop increasing. However, no leader has taken responsibility for developing a plan to deal with that increase. So we're repeating these requests from last year. We hope that they will not be ignored. We've also identified 2 new requests. As a result of the research that we've conducted on the system campuses this year, we found some pretty upsetting details about how things are going on the system campuses. The International Association of Counseling Services recommends 1 counselor for every 1,100 to 1,500 students for adequate service. That would translate to 7 to 10 counselors here at the University of Minnesota Duluth. We currently have 4. The other system campuses are similarly struggling in many ways. And making matters worse, in rural communities, there are often not a lot of community resources that we can fall back on as a backup. The Crookston counselor can't just refer someone to the Emily program if they have an eating disorder. He has to figure out something himself. There's an opportunity for tremendous impact with even the most basic investments on the system campuses. And so we're requesting that the budget include investments for the system campuses, just like those that are being made on the Twin Cities right now. Our second request is that we include concrete quantitative measures of counseling wait times and other patient-centered metrics on the University Progress Card. The Progress Card is how we track everything that's important to us: the number of citations per faculty member, ACT scores, the rank of the medical school, donations, how welcome students of color feel on campus. Student mental health belongs on that list. Recognizing that mental health is a prerequisite for academic success, we should be measuring it. If we can track it, then you will know when things start to get bad again.
The next topic we would like to discuss is the importance of disaggregating student race and ethnicity data. Minnesota has one of the largest achievement gaps in higher education. For example, in comparison to state population, Hispanic students were underrepresented by 2.3% of total enrollment in 2015. Now, this may seem like a small number, but at such a large institution, that translates to about 1,500 Hispanic students left out. Though identifying the enrollment gap for Hispanic students is quite simple, current practices make this hard for other groups, particularly subgroups. By disaggregating data, we would allow students to further specify ethnicity or race if they do so choose, and could then use that data to see which populations may need additional support. It's critical to note that no recommendation is being made to use this data in any way as a factor in admissions, any more than it already is being used in terms of affirmative action. For example, the Minnesota Office of Higher Education reports that 65% of Asians in Minnesota have attended college. Comparatively, another report found that for the Hmong, Laotian, Cambodian, and Vietnamese populations, that number was actually around 35%. That's almost half. It appears that certain subgroups in the Asian category are inflating these numbers for some of the other groups and therefore masks some of the problems. Another example is with black students. The table on page 100 of your docket will clearly show that black students are underrepresented at this university. That's a problem of its own, but there are deeper challenges that are being masked. The Minnesota Office of Higher Education reported that Somalis as a whole had lower educational attainment than other Africans. While only 15% of Somalis had obtained a college degree, that rate was between 30 and 35% for other Africans, such as Ethiopians and Liberians. Aggregation masks such trends. When you group the whole group in one, you're not able to see some of those other trends. And that particular example is important because we know that Minnesota has the largest population of Somalis in North America. Nationwide, this is being used more and more. As part of a 2016 disaggregation initiative, the Department of Education gave the state of Minnesota an $836,000 grant to disaggregate this data in the K-12 system. Furthermore, the University of California system has also followed this trend to better account for their unique population. Studies have shown that lowering the achievement gap has many benefits, such as higher GDP and other things. However, the goal of closing the gap has intrinsic value within itself in that it's the right thing to do, and that alone should be enough. We actually don't even know the full impact of the gap here at this university because of the insufficiency of data currently gathered. Though we serve students from all over the world, this is a land-grant institution, a word we really like to use. And as a land-grant institution, we have a fiduciary duty to first and foremost serve the people of Minnesota, and that means replicating the population and looking more like them. Therefore, the student representatives to the Board of Regents recommend that the board should adjust the current application process system-wide to incorporate a comprehensive question about race or ethnicity, not to be used as a factor in admissions. I will now speak about our next topic. In the wake of the Milo Yiannopoulos protest at UC Berkeley, to the vandalism of the college Republicans' pro-Trump mural on the Twin Cities campus, free speech on college campuses is clearly a hot topic right now. In his visit to the Twin Cities campus, Yiannopoulos was interrupted by students during a protest, and a few months earlier, a speech by an Israeli law professor was also delayed. Needless to say, the issue is already affecting our university. The First Amendment tells us that no law can be made infringing upon the First Amendment. Although the Supreme Court has defined certain categories of speech that may be regulated based on content, notably absent for this list is hate speech and political speech. Therefore, except under a few narrowly defined circumstances, governments cannot exclude from public discourse any topic on the ground that it is wrong, offensive, evil, or even dangerous. The court has defended this when they upheld the right to burn the American flag in protest, when they upheld the right for the KKK to burn a cross, and in the seminal free speech case, Brandenburg versus Ohio. So what are the limits of free speech? Are there special rules for college campuses? What should the university's response be to hate speech, and how should the university address student protest? Where hate speech is concerned, more speech, not less, is actually the proper solution, especially at universities whose mission is to facilitate learning through open debate and study. Instead of opting for gestures that merely seem to fix the problem, universities have the hard work to do of recruitment to increase student and faculty diversity, counseling and education to raise awareness about bigotry and its history, and changing curricula to institutionalize more inclusive approaches to all subject matter. At the recent State of the University speech, President Kaler said, "We cannot condone a chilling of conversation," but then also said, "We surely can't stand for hateful words or actions." This dichotomy or pickle that our president is caught in represents the fine line that colleges have to walk. How can we hold steadfast to the bedrock of free speech while still aggressively tackling issues like bigotry, racism, homophobia, and all those things? At another point in the address, President Kaler also said that the policy and traditions are clear. However, recent events like the Morrill Hall sit-in, in which 13 students were arrested, to the mural defacements on the Washington Avenue Bridge, highlight the fact that policies are actually far from clear. Currently, Section 2 of the Student Conduct Code states that students are entitled to exercise their rights to inquire and dissent, speak freely, and peaceably assemble and protest to the extent permissible under both the First Amendment and the Student Conduct Code. However, in Section 4, Subdivision 16, the code lists certain forbidden behavior and actually very much seems to contradict the earlier statement. Some of the forbidden behaviors include participating in, leading, or inciting a demonstration that disrupts the normal operations, engaging in intentional obstruction that interferes with freedom of movement, using sound amplification equipment on campus without authorization. The two contradictory statements leave students to wonder what exactly would they have to do to both exercise their First Amendment rights and obey the student conduct code. Some of the questions that arise are, when can a protest take place? Where would protesters have to stand or march? Are the rules different on a weekday versus a weekend, inside versus outside, for a rally versus a sit-in? These questions usually go unanswered until the police get involved because students have gone too far. The Faculty Consultative Committee put together a set of 4 guiding principles that the board and the administration should consider adopting as a foundation. In response to this document, the Council of Graduate Students, or COGS, issued a policy statement on free speech principles. Though COGS voiced concerns about some of the content in the FCC's report, both groups agreed that a guiding document on this topic is necessary. These are just 2 examples of the kind of momentum forming behind this topic at our university. Therefore, in order to protect students' First Amendment rights while creating a welcoming and respectful environment, and to clarify how students can exercise those First Amendment rights while still following the Student Conduct Code, the student representatives to the Board of Regents recommend that the board establish a comprehensive, constitutional, system-wide policy on student free speech and protest by fall 2018. And we ask that in creating this policy, the board consider the FCC report and COGS response. Furthermore, we ask that the board direct the administration to develop a central resource or guide on this topic by fall 2017.
Regents, we'd like to conclude by noting that this is the first time since 2008 that we're aware of that there's been an official meeting on a system campus. Mr. Langworthy informed me that we're hoping to return to this practice more regularly, and I think that's really commendable. Actually visiting physically the system campuses has really changed my view every time that I've done it, and I wish that I had started earlier in my career. Working on mental health has made it clear to me how the system campuses have been excluded from the conversation, and that makes us miss really important ideas. I'd like to spend a little time talking about how the structure of this forum shapes the kind of information that's available to you. There are relatively few opportunities for students and faculty to interact with you directly in Regents meetings. At other universities, there are regular public forums that are available to anyone, so that when problems happen, you can hear about them directly from any member of the university community. We have one public budget forum. It takes place on the Twin Cities campus in May while students are in finals. And I'd like to ask that we explore other opportunities to hear more voices at Regents meetings. Your job is to hold the university accountable, and I encourage you to consider how you can, as a board, make sure that you have all the information you need to do that. Thank you very much, and we'd welcome your questions and comments.
Thank you very much, Ms. Mitchell, Mr. Kananye, for your presentation, for your caring, and reporting to the board and the president this morning. This time, we'd ask our colleagues if they have comments or questions of either of you today. Regents, Regent Powell.
Thank you, Chair Johnson. Representative Mitchell, thank you very much for your report. Really 2 questions, maybe requests for clarification. First, I read your report. Thank you very much. So obviously some troubling, issues and concerns and trends that you raise. One of my questions is, in your work and your research, do you have a sense for whether there is an opportunity for prevention as we think about mental health and just preventative programs on campus and ways to think about the campus environment? I mean, is there something that we can do that's preventative just to help us start to reduce the high incidence? And so I'd be interested in your comments on that. The other question I have has to do with the role that the university should play in terms of counseling. Are we, and I'm really looking for information, do we think of ourselves as a first responder, and that our job is to assess and then help students find private care, or are we really the only resource that the students are going to have for counseling? So I just would like to understand what role we play in sort of the therapy continuum.
Thank you, Regent Powell. We'll start with you, Ms. Mitchell.
Sure. Regent Powell, Chair Johnson, members of the board, those are both really excellent questions, so thank you for bringing those up. So I've had quite a bit of personal experience as an instructor working with students who have mental health concerns, and recently one of my students came to office hours crying and reported some serious problems. And I talked to some of my colleagues about it. You know, what should I do as an instructor? What is my responsibility here? And I think the answer is that, look, I'm someone who knows how to help. And so I think that makes it my responsibility to do something. And what I've done is talked with the student, directed her to resources in a couple of different places, but connected her personally with someone that I trust, and followed up with her and made sure a couple weeks down the line that, you know, have you gotten a chance? Is it working out? How can we help you? And taking that kind of proactive approach, I think, is necessary. I've experienced loss from mental health concerns before, and it's a driving fear. And I think that it needs to be for our community as well. When you've experienced something like that, it can be life-changing. I think that our responsibility as a university is to serve an educational role. And many students who experience mental health concerns, they first arise around this time of life. In the early 20s is when many serious mental health concerns first emerge. And we're in a position to educate students about how to manage their care, how to get connected with resources, and how to advocate for themselves as patients and clients. And so I think that puts us in a really good position to make a lifelong impact on these students. And the fact that we can help makes us responsible to help, I think. The situation can be very different, and like I mentioned, in the system campuses, oftentimes there aren't those community resources to lean on in the same way that there is, you know, in the Twin Cities system. At the same time, I think that you know, there are some students whose concerns are very serious and maybe better served by being connected with someone in the community. However, oftentimes we refer students out who have really high quality health insurance, for example, who might have a positive impact by being kept in our system. And I think that's something to consider. As far as prevention goes, yes, I think that's very important. And I think that there are some initiatives going on that are going to help with that. At the same time, we're in a crisis situation, and dealing with that crisis is necessary. I know for many people, one of the main stressors in their lives is concerns about other students who are in serious trouble. And if we can alleviate those concerns, I think that's also a way to address some of the prevention that needs to happen as well.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Very good, thank you. Prior to calling on Regent Rocha, I failed to announce that two of our colleagues, Regent Patty Simmons and Regent Linda Cohn, are not with us today. They're dealing with family illness issues, and we think of both of them as well, because there are 12 members of the Board of Regents, but only 10 are present today. Regent Rocha, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Going back to the comments of Representative Kenyanya, talking about free speech issues. Of course, a couple of us coming out of law school, at least we're mandatorily required to take some class in relation to freedom of speech issues. And I noticed that you indicate that you want a comprehensive system-wide policy by fall of 2018. It strikes me that entire governments are created and dissolved in shorter periods of time than that. So is it your perspective that the resources within students, among students, including graduate students or professional students in law school and undergraduate students that have a specific interest in this, is there a possibility of having some engagement? Now, I'm maybe asking a question that's already been considered, and President Kaler, you may already be working down this road, but is there a process for starting that conversation sooner, and kind of, you know, rather than just sort of thrusting in the lap of the board, here's an issue, saying, you know, we have a question, an issue, and we would like to work with the administration to try to find a comprehensive system-wide policy that makes sense, that ultimately would inform the board's conversation about that.
Mr. Chair,
Mr.
Regent-
Canella?
Mr. Chair, Regent Rocha, I think the key word there is comprehensive, and that's why we gave such a large time frame. These conversations are already happening within student government, because that's how they end up in our report, because we work with our various, MSA, UMDSA, COGS, to kind of find out what we need to bring up here. So I think the main thinking in giving such a large time period was for it to be comprehensive, for it to include staff, faculty, administration, students from all the campuses, and that's why we put a large time frame on. If it could be done sooner and still be comprehensive, I think we'd all be on board for that, but we didn't want to put an unrealistic goal on that one.
Mr. Chair,
Thank-
just a follow-up.
Regent Rocha?
Just a follow-up comment. Yeah, my only concern was that, having sat in the chair that you both are sitting in today many years ago, 18 months is likely beyond the life cycle of most student leaders, and as you're in your junior and senior years. So by the time the conversation that starts now actually comes to that point, you may have a whole another cohort of students. And so to the extent that there's a way of being, timely and deliberate, I think that would be helpful to the board, at least from my perspective. Thank you.
Thank you, Regent Rocha. Regent McMillan.
Thank you, Chair Johnson. I don't have a question, but I want to do a couple things. First of all, as Regent Powell did a minute ago, acknowledge a well-written, thoughtful, sophisticated report that tackles challenging issues in an upfront way. So that's great, but more importantly, I just want to acknowledge your commitment to improving governance by finding time in what are already busy graduate and undergraduate days and representing your colleagues in student governance. I never tackled student governance as a student here at UMD. It was kind of outside my radar screen, and Mr. Kenyan, I have a good sense of yours, probably a better sense than Representative Mitchell's commitment to everyday work, and then adding on top of that the layering of being involved in governance and helping raise our standard of governance, and doing so is just really great. We'll have a chance to say thank you and goodbye to some later in the year, but this is a firsthand opportunity to experience what you do for us. Thank you.
Thank you, Regent McMillan.
Thank you, Regent McMillan. As a matter of information, there are, I believe, 8 student representatives representing the various campuses within the university system. And these young folks are at our meetings. They sit at the committee tables and are able to ask questions and bring forth ideas and concerns, and we much appreciate the work that they do. Regent Anderson.
Chair Johnson, a few of them have joined us today.
Pardon?
So a few of the other representatives have joined us today as well. So
Oh, there
thank you
are.
to them for
Please, the other student representatives. Please stand. Very good. Thank you. Thank you for the acknowledgement. Regent Anderson.
Chair Johnson, students, thanks for coming today. Thanks for the work you do. I always enjoy seeing you. My question is, when I read your report about a week ago when it came out for us to read, I was struck by well, parts of us have troubled me about the diversity issue, and I'm one who thinks that diversity comes in many areas. Diversity comes in a young student who's belonged to a trapper family in Roseau, or a student who's from southwest Minnesota and is a turkey farmer. They probably have different experiences than an investment banker family from Wayzata. So there's some diversity there. And we count the diversities in racial tones. I see that. I worry that we get too caught up in that we're going to make sure we have the correct number of left-handed people and the correct number of red-headed people. You have a statement on page 103 right below and I just bring this to your attention because I don't think it's a true statement. On page 103, right below the table, and it reads, "While white, Native American, and Asian students are proportionally represented in the university." If you look at your table above that, are they? Are they proportionally represented? Or is there, I'm trying to figure out where that statement came from, because it's troubled me when you look at the statistics. To me, the statement looks different. Do you have any response, or do you know where I'm getting at on that?
Mr. Kananye?
Mr. Chair, Regent Anderson, yeah, I think I do know the one you're referring to. I think they were slightly overrepresented, correct?
Well, no, I'm actually looking at the white population, according to your table, has 81% of the population in Minnesota, and we admit them at a 67% rate according to 2015. So to me, they are not proportionally represented. I'm not saying that's wrong. I'm saying we need to be diverse, but if you had a statistic that said, you know, the future of Minnesota is going this way, and we want to admit to that, I'm fine with that, because this is probably not representative of what the high school classes are, because we're changing so fast. But the table and the wording, to me, don't make sense.
Mr. Kananye?
Mr. Chair, Regent Anderson, I do not have that specific table in front of me, but it is possible that maybe that was misworded. I thank you for those comments.
Okay.
But to address the earlier issue, you know, of the different forms of diversity, I think the important point we were trying to bring up with that item, or with this topic as a whole, is with if we were able to disaggregate and you could look at subgroups, then you would see if other ones are performing more poorly. But I do appreciate the comments that diversity does come in different forms, and you know, it is possible that we misspoke there. So I'll definitely take a look at that, page 103. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Ms. Mitchell?
Thank you, Chair Johnson, and thank you, Regent Anderson, for the question. I think that the first part of your question really gets to what we're trying to communicate in this section overall. The diversity that we see even within the Minnesota population is missed by clumping them all together within this demographic. However, we see kind of a similar effect when we clump everyone who, you know, was born in that giant area that we consider Asia. We miss a lot of the diversity within that group as well. You know, there may be important differences between maybe a student who is the child of an affluent Japanese family versus a refugee family, for example, and we want to make sure that those perspectives are included appropriately at this university too.
Very good, thank you. We have about 5-6 minutes left during this period, and we have 4 or 5 regents wishing to make comment. Regent Shu.
Thank you, Chair Johnson. Thank you, representatives. First, I want to make sure to Representative Mitchell, I think I did try and schedule a meeting with you after we received your report on mental health. I'm not sure if that has gone through yet, but I just wanted to make sure you knew that I am trying to meet with you.
Great.
I am troubled by some of the mental health issues and challenges that have been brought to us recently. I don't know if you were you on the Provost's committee on, or last year, the committee on mental health that produced the report?
I have been sorry, can I jump in?
That's fine.
Okay. I've been participating as a representative on the Provost Committee this year, and I have visited them several times last year as well.
Okay, thank you. I actually proposed a budget amendment last year, I don't know if you're aware of that, to fully fund the Provost's, or the recommendations from the report. And I think it was $200,000 from the Central Reserves Fund for that purpose, and that was defeated. I think only a few of my colleagues voted with me on that. But what I'd like to say is I'm still a little bit, and these are questions that I'll talk to you about when we meet, but the concern on the other campuses, I think was highlighted today, and I'm not sure, do you have a dollar figure that would be able to, that we would have to appropriate to fund the additional resources for your recommendation?
I think
Ms. Mitchell?
Thank you, Chair Johnson. Thank you, Regent Shu, for your questions. I look forward to discussing this further with you. I think that the investment that we saw last year of $200,000 has gone a long way on the Twin Cities campus, and if we made an investment commensurate with that on the system campuses, I think that would resolve many of the most pressing issues. The report provides some estimates from staff and administrators on the system campuses as far as their needs for counseling staff to address the most urgent student needs. And I think that level of investment would not only recognize that the system campuses are just as important as the Twin Cities, but also address a lot of the most urgent concerns.
Thank you. Follow-up, Mr. Chair.
Regent Shu?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to also make sure that we're not doing things to cause these mental health problems with students. I know other universities such as MIT have instituted, I guess, I don't know how to say it, but a call to faculty to take some pressure off of the students in terms of the coursework and grading, et cetera. I don't know what our situation is here, whether or not we're causing our own problems. If so, we should probably look at that instead of just trying to fix the symptoms of the problem. And maybe you can answer that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Chair Johnson.
Ms. Mitchell?
Chair Johnson, Regent Shu. The philosophy that I think is best for that kind of question is not that we should be trying to water things down or make it easier on students unnecessarily in the classroom because things are too difficult for them. We expect students to face serious challenges in academia, and they should be prepared to do that. You know, that's not to say that we can't re-examine our practices and make sure that we're not unnecessarily stressing students, but I don't think that we should be trying to make the content simpler or more basic or get rid of exams completely or anything like that. We should be preparing students appropriately to meet those challenges and then making sure that they have a safety net for when they fail, when things get overwhelming, that they have the resources they need to pick themselves back up.
Very good, thank you. Regent Omari?
Regent Shu, did you want to?
Yeah, I just wanted to say one more thing about the diversity question. I think one of the side effects of becoming less diverse from a scholastic aptitude perspective by driving up our ACT scores, we are making it more difficult for diverse populations to be admitted. I mean, enrollment comes after admission, which comes after application. And I think by setting up the system that we have today, we are actually making it more difficult to actually get the applications from the diverse people, and then making it harder for them to become admitted and then ultimately enroll. And then obviously tuition is a big aspect of that. So,
Thank you, Regent Shu. The more precise and succinct your next questions are, the better grade you're going to get. Regent Omari.
Well, we're out of luck in that one. Sorry. Chair Johnson, thank you, student representatives. I appreciate it. In 2011, I was sitting there, and I can tell you that the report I presented was not nearly as good as this one. So thank you very much. I'm going to start actually on my colleague Regent Anderson's question. You're right in the numbers, and I think what the point I would bring to this conversation is we have information about certain groups, and we know that certain groups and identifiers of groups are struggling. And that's really what we want to bring to the table. So we just introduced a new scholarship for students from greater Minnesota because we know that that's a demographic that might be struggling. We also know within these demographics, as we've seen of these education gaps, that there are significant challenges for specific groups. And so then the question becomes, when we know that information, is one, can we get more information? And then two, what are we going to do about the problem? And that's really what I think we should gather and take from this. As far as the mental health conversation, I would actually look to the president to find and to direct the president to fund the $200,000 that it would take to get the staffing levels up, much like Regent Shu did last year, and provide those resources so that we can get the staffing up. I do think, as far as metrics go, having the board place a metric without understanding the practicality of the metrics would be unwise. And I'll just give a quick example about the wait times, right? If we say wait times need to be no longer than X, what have you, without providing proper funding or staffing, I can almost guarantee that the quality of care is going to go down. They're going to meet the metric, and they're going to say, well, yep, hey, we hit the timing that you wanted us to hit, but what type of quality is associated with that? And we see that in all kinds of things when you structure things according to compensation, teachers cheating for their students, and so on and so forth. So it's important that I think when we set the metrics, one, we set them in knowing that funding will have to come behind it, and then two, setting them with practitioners at the table who know what this looks like on the ground. So again, I appreciate the report. Shout out to all the other student representatives in the back and who might not be here as well.
That is a grade of B.
Highest grade I ever got.
Regent Lucas, please, and then we'll conclude with Regent Beeson.
Thank you, Chair Johnson. I'm going for an A here, so I'd just like to compliment you for looking at the disaggregation of student race data. It's always bothered me. I'm half Chinese, but my parents and my grandparents all went to college, and I hate to be in that box that says that I'm part of that diverse population. So I think breaking it down is very different than, and you mentioned that, and thank you very much for putting a spotlight on it.
Thank you.
A minus?
That's an A. Regent Beeson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have no expectations of getting an A, but I'll try to be short. This is an outstanding report, and I'm focusing on the free speech piece, and ask you to think. We can and we should pass a policy about it, but the issue around free speech on campus is really cultural, and there is. I'm not sure whether intolerance creates incivility or incivility creates intolerance, but we need to have the student organizations. Students own this issue, and we may need to learn how to be civil and tolerant. I don't think it's coming naturally out of the families and with the media. So I think this is a bigger issue. It's a very serious issue. Political intolerance, racial intolerance, religious intolerance. It's a big surprise to me the last few years how much of an issue this has become.
Very good. Thank you, Regents. Thank you, student representatives, for your work, your diligence, and your comments. And now you can go to class.
Thank you very much.
Very good. Thank you. Next, we will receive an update on the system-wide strategic planning process from Chancellor Lemke from our Rochester campus and Vice Provost Ropers-Hallman. President Kaler, would you like to provide some introductory remarks prior to the presentation, please?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Very briefly, I'd like to get an A, too. As you know, we've been engaged in a significant effort to develop a system-wide strategic plan. Chancellor Lemke and Vice Provost Ropers-Hallman have been shepherding this project in a remarkably energetic, tireless, and thoughtful way, and I'm grateful for their work. They've done a lot, and they have significant participation of a diverse cross-section of members of our university system. It's important work. Steve and Rebecca, thank you for what you've done, and I know we all look forward to hearing about the next phase of this initiative, and with that, I'll turn it over to you.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. President, and please proceed.
Thank you, Chair Johnson. This first slide recaps sort of the journey we've been on in the strategic planning process. In the fall, during the inquiry stage, we did a lot of listening. We visited all the campuses and listened to faculty, staff, and students. And then we also listened to leadership and extension, the Office of Continuing Education, the Research Outreach Center's Office of Public Engagement, and other groups. We also listened to you in December, and we heard your ideas about what an ideal system would look like. Since then, we've continued listening to other internal groups, met with external stakeholders, conducted an external survey, and worked with our 27-member committee both during a day-long retreat and in additional follow-up activities to begin this process of knitting together these ideas into a strategic plan. We will update you today on the ideas that are emerging about a structure and a direction for the system-wide strategic plan. But we still have more work to do. So after today, we will begin the affirmation phase and again visit and share some of these emerging ideas with our colleagues, as well as to begin to vet some implementation strategies. And then we'll be back in front of you with a draft plan in May. There are several key ideas that you will hear in today's presentation that are really core concepts that have emerged during all these deliberations. These concepts are: the University of Minnesota system has a special role in the state that requires us to conduct outstanding research and extend our work into communities, as well as providing outstanding educational experience to students. The system-wide plan is a connector plan. It is meant to create connections between campuses and resources throughout the system, rather than dictate specific strategies to individual campuses. You will hear about what we call a theory of action and strategic intentions, and these are really meant to guide our future decisions as this moves on in time, recognizing that specific actions and tactics will need to be tailored by the circumstances at that time. It's something which you know. Each campus is distinctive, but we need to invest in those existing strengths and prioritize the roles we play in the state. We have an expansive capacity, but we also have a very broad mission as a system.
So we wanted to just remind you of a few of the high-level themes that we shared with you at our conversation in December. So first of all, faculty, staff, and students are proud of what they do and how it contributes to Minnesota and to the world. On every campus and in every aspect of our mission, we have people who are committed to excellence and to making a difference in the world. People on all campuses and in Extension and the Research and Outreach Centers want to be valued for the work that they do. Because people are committed to excellence and making a difference, they want to be recognized as having the capacity to add value throughout the system. They also want to be at the table during decision making so that decisions take into account what they need to optimize their contributions. Faculty, staff, students, and administrators lack knowledge about the contributions and unique strengths across the system. It became clear on every campus that people weren't quite clear on what other people were doing. We were not yet thinking as a system, though as Steve and I have been noting to each other recently, I think this is starting because of the conversations that we have been having. It's also going to be important as we move forward to balance multiple and sometimes competing values, things like innovation, effectiveness, efficiency, responsibility, inspiration, and of course excellence, which almost goes without saying, as we move into our future. We'll need to think about all of these values, balancing them, negotiating them, thinking about how they compete or could be complementary as we craft our future together.
During our committee deliberations, we talked about our strengths as a system. And here's what our committee members said. We are a university and workplace of choice. You know, this reminds me of the employee value proposition triangle that we often talk about in faculty and staff. And a lot of the committee members were at the top of that triangle. Because of our distinctiveness of our campuses and their units, collectively, we are very comprehensive. And we have leveraged the system through the implementation of our enterprise-wide systems to meet our administrative needs. We have done this well. We have done this for a long time, and sometimes I think we just take that success for granted. And despite some of the recent dialogue, our committee members felt that our state has historically valued and support higher education, and we see that as a strength. And we do partner.
Of course, our committee also pointed out some of the challenges that we'll be facing as a system moving forward. How do we make sure that each aspect of our system gets adequate attention for them to thrive? And we heard a little bit of that threaded throughout the student representatives' comments just now. How can we work together across our various units, overcoming barriers related to locations, resources, expectations, to strengthen who we are as a whole? How do we make sure that we are serving Minnesota in concrete and visible ways while also advancing all other aspects of our mission? How do we thoughtfully draw upon the increasingly diverse student, staff, and faculty population to enrich our system? And how do we fulfill our mission? How do we make sure that we have outstanding space and facilities to support the outstanding research, teaching, and service that we expect of ourselves? So each of these is, in fact, a challenge, but it's also an opportunity for us to think about our priorities and how we want to move forward together.
Now, we would like to share the results of our external stakeholder survey. We invited alumni, business leaders, elected officials, donors, community members to comment on the university system. In one question, we asked them to provide 3 words to describe the university system today, and then asked them to provide 3 words to describe the ideal university system in the future. Very similar to the type of conversation that we had with you in December. We present these results as a wordle, where the size of the word on the slide depicts the frequency of the use of that word by the responders. In this slide, these are the words scaled by frequency to describe our current state. For me, these are very familiar words. I've heard them often to describe the University of Minnesota. However, it's nice to see in this type of presentation the words scaled by their frequency and agreement. Helps us to put some of the comments, in my opinion, in perspective. There are certainly some descriptions or descriptors that we need to pay attention to, like disorganized, unfocused, bloated, decentralized, siloed, and so on. But the category of large words, which means that these are the words that people are using most frequently to describe us, is excellent, research, diverse. To me, this means that our stakeholders have a clear expectation of excellence and world class for our institution. This is the distinctive role we play in this ecosystem of higher education in this state. In our meeting with Commissioner Poggemiller, he strongly encouraged us never to shy away from this critical role of excellence.
So as Chancellor Lemkool pointed out, we also asked them about their ideal future and asked them to go through that same sort of exercise. And you can see that the presentation here is a little bit different. While excellence figures prominently in this picture, some of the other words that were mentioned frequently also suggest how people define what they mean by excellence. So they want us to be innovative, diverse, affordable, and recognize our unique role in the state as a leader in many areas, to include in relevant, world-class research. So thankfully, their vision of us aligns with so much of how we see ourselves.
Well, I know you've been looking at a lot of maps the last couple of days, and unfortunately, I'm going to show you a bunch more maps. But in any event, this next series of Minnesota state maps kind of characterizes our journey of thinking about the system. So we began our journey understanding the distinctiveness of our 5 campuses, which vary in place and local culture, areas of excellence, and size. It's just so wonderful to visit the campuses, and you could sense that today, that you could experience this culture and this place in Duluth. But the important point that I want to make here is we're not a franchise operation. Our places are very different. Then we learned about the pervasive geographical reach and the programmatic scope of extension and the research outreach centers. And you've seen this map before. And yesterday you saw a version of this map. And it's something that I'm just learning much more about. That is the role the Academic Health Center plays across the state. And I will confess to you right up front, I'm sure I've missed a dot. Every day we learn something new about what's going on in the University of Minnesota system. But the point here is collectively we have an incredible footprint across the state. And remember, these are physical sites. If we instead inventoried our programmatic efforts emanating from these physical sites and constructed what I would call a heat map depicting the programming across the state of Minnesota would be lit up with maroon and gold. This distribution of distinctive statewide resources creates a real opportunity for us as a system. It creates the opportunity for the University of Minnesota to be even more, greater than the sum of its parts, and have even a greater positive impact on the state, nation, and world.
So what kind of a plan will facilitate that impact? As you all know, there are multiple ways to think about both the strategic planning process and the outcome or product of a strategic planning process. Guided by our initial charge, some of your questions from our December conversations, and many conversations with stakeholder groups and President Kaler, we're approaching the strategic plan as a connector plan. We're not creating a plan to dictate particular tactics in particular units. All campuses and many units have their own plans that they have thoughtfully constructed and which are relevant within their own context. However, we understand and appreciate the need for a plan that helps us work together as a system and provides a framework for informed decision-making from those of us who have the responsibility to ensure that the system is as strong as possible. What we are creating is a plan that recognizes the many assets and challenges that we face as a system and suggests the contours of a path that we can walk together into our future, even as we can't see all of the specific challenges and opportunities that might be around the corner.
During our early committee deliberations, we, in some ways, were rewriting the mission statement. At least we discovered that we thought we were rewriting the mission statement. And when we looked at the mission statement, we said, well, gee whiz, this says it better than any of us have been saying it. And I think this has been a really healthy exercise because our mission of research and discovery, teaching and learning, and outreach and public service must be our anchor. But as our committee discussions continued, and we talked about how we have to interact with each other. So you see, we would use the words respect, cooperation, serving community, setting high expectations. But as we discovered, if you read beyond the formal mission statement, there is a set of university guiding principles. And again, many of those principles captured the essence of our discussions within the committee. And the way that I think about it, in our own way, an independent way, our committee affirmed the guiding principles. So anchored by our mission and guiding principles, we asked ourselves this question: what do systems do? You know, I just showed you a map of physical assets across the state. And sometimes when I ask about university systems, people show me a map. And our committee wanted to do something different. They wanted the University of Minnesota system to be more than a map. They wanted the system to be active, to be a verb, and in their own, in an appropriate way, add value to us achieving our mission. So we spent considerable time debating over the past several months trying to answer this question: what is the purpose of the university system? What's the purpose of the system? What is displayed here is our most recent iteration, and our choice of words do matter here. We struggled with them. So for instance, as a system, you have to understand this is a very unique perspective. This is a different perspective than a college or a campus or a unit. In fact, you got to remember, systems don't do research. They don't teach. They don't do service. Next word, the most important word, will connect. This is our value proposition. Can we find ways through connecting where the whole is greater than the sum of the parts? Then the next part of the purpose statement is really captures our mission: education, research, and extension and outreach. But the modifiers here are important: outstanding, globally significant. Again, this is our niche and our higher education in this state, and it aligns with the expectations of our stakeholders. And then finally, our land grant mission: to positively impact the quality of life in Minnesota, the nation, and the world. Now, this slide, which we refer to as a theory of action for the system, in many ways links a lot of these discussions. But we also wanted to capture what distinguishes the University of Minnesota and its role it plays in the state from that role played by the Minnesota state system. And again, this is the lens used by Commissioner Poggemiller when we reviewed an earlier draft with him about the theory of action. So if I read this chart from left to right, if we first recognize our unique role in the state as codified in the state statute, and we value our distinctiveness of the campuses and the comprehensive and distributed nature of our system, if we do that, then we will invest in the distinctiveness, preserve it, because this makes our system richer and stronger. We will develop more linkages and collaborations, but we also have to minimize competition and overlap. And of course, we have to advance our mission of excellence. And if we do all those things, then we are living the purpose of the system. Now, to end here, I want to come back to something that you brought up in the listening session in December, and it was really a key question for us. And the question was, why do this? What are the outcomes or benefits of the system by taking this system view? Maybe we shouldn't be anything more than a map. But we focused on these core questions since our December meeting, and this led to the development of 3 categories of strategic intentions, which will constitute a significant part of the plan.
So we realize that we need to have strategies going forward, of course. We need to think about who we are now, who we want to be, and how we might logically create a plan for us to get there. This plan is focused on a decision-making framework that outlines what we intend to prioritize to fulfill our mission and play our unique role within the state. We are still in conversations with people around the state, though, so these are ideas that will likely be refined and fine-tuned as we continue this process in the next few months. So the first one here, we will support the development of learners and leaders across their lifespan to equip them to productively engage in their workplaces and communities. We want to ensure that students in for-credit and non-credit programs have the opportunity to benefit from their association with the University of Minnesota throughout the state and throughout their lives. We want our education to support them so that they can contribute to their workplaces and to their communities. So some examples of what is likely to be part of this section is to effectively meet the needs of students from across Minnesota and beyond. We want to develop system-wide recruitment and admissions strategies that match the campus experience to the fit and needs of students. We want to increase access for undergraduate and graduate students to start, complete, or supplement a University of Minnesota degree by developing a system-wide approach to providing online learning opportunities. We want to make sure that all students across the system have access to high-impact learning experiences that we know from research are transformative in their learning and growth, things such as study abroad, service learning, and internationalized curriculum. We want to develop opportunities for students to grow intercultural skills to effectively negotiate culturally complex situations that we're seeing every day on our campuses, throughout our state, throughout our nation and world. And there are many more ideas that we have under each of these categories. I'm just giving a few examples today. The second strategic intention focuses on facilitating scholarly research and creative work to solve problems, expand possibilities, and enrich the human condition. So one of the most important roles of the University of Minnesota in the state is to develop scholarship and creative activity that enhances who we are. We solve medical problems and we create theater productions. We research how to partner with Minnesota's agricultural industry, and we learn how conflicts develop and are mitigated around the globe. We partner with community members to develop knowledge about how school climate may influence academic success and graduation rates. And we study how our private behaviors reflect and influence larger social values. This research role that we play, as we have recently heard in some conversations with community leaders, is what makes us unique. And to be clear, they rely on us to perform this aspect of our role. So some examples of what we're thinking about this in terms of how our system can facilitate the strategic intention. So we can leverage research facilities across the system to promote collaboration and maximize their use. We can focus scholarly research and creative activity on promoting the health and well-being of people throughout Minnesota. We can recognize and invest in distinctive areas of research which are aligned with the research of faculty at each campus and throughout Extension. And then, of course, we can utilize technology to bring together researchers and scholars across the system to make sure that the expertise is coming together. The final strategic intention that we have right now is partnering with Minnesota communities to address challenges and create opportunities. So, of course, this strategic intention focuses on one of the most important groups to which we are beholden, the people of Minnesota. We are a world-class university system. In that way, we offer to Minnesota residents some of the best public educational opportunities that the United States has to offer. We prepare them to stay in Minnesota and create a new business or lead a school. We also prepare them to lead international organizations or businesses around the world. Minnesota is connected to the world, and we are uniquely poised to help our citizens, to help ourselves benefit from those global connections. So some examples of how the system could help fulfill all of those functions. We want to maximize the responsiveness and efficacy of the university to address community needs, both in urban areas and rural areas, encouraging cooperative efforts between existing units with connections throughout the state and throughout the world to support flourishing rural and small town communities, and to support engagement in urban communities as well. We also want to build on the existing strengths of our units, such as Extension, Research and Outreach Centers, Office of Public Engagement, and many others, to promote engagement with and address the problems of Minnesota communities through research, teaching, and outreach. So part of the plan that we'll share with you in May will also be focused on how to build the system's capacity so that we can achieve these strategic intentions. We've identified 4 key areas under which there are several specific items. These show the value that we believe in understanding and strengthening the distinctiveness of our units, making sure that stakeholders inside and outside the system understand all that we have to offer, recognizing that diversity is required for inclusive excellence so that the University of Minnesota can achieve its potential, and that we need to think of ourselves as a system if we want to realize the benefits of those relationships. So just as a quick reminder, we hope that what you have heard here as we begin to close is that we have a special role in the state, and we've been told by our community members that we've talked with, they want us to play that special role. We're proposing a connector plan. We want to guide, we're proposing a theory of action, strategic intentions meant to guide future decisions, while recognizing that specific actions will need to be tailored to circumstances. And each of our campuses really is distinctive and needs to be recognized as such in decision-making processes.
To end, during this affirmation stage, we will start to also vet some recommendations about how to create and perpetuate the intentionality that's going to be needed to do this system work around the strategic intentions and around system capacity building. We will share and solicit feedback during our visits about a proposed administrative structure, which is really, in the way I think of it, a revised administrative structure. We will propose an engagement by the Board of Regents, because we know that you have given a lot of energy to this whole process. We will propose a work plan with a set of baseline measures so we can begin to measure progress and develop timelines for action steps. And we will also develop a rubric that the board can use to assist them in making decisions and investments that are aligned with the system plan and the work plan. So that's our work to be done when we come back for a next draft in May. So at this point, we'd be happy to hear your comments.
Very good. Thank you for a very excellent presentation and your dedicated work on this project. Regents, comments, questions? Regent McMillan.
Thank you, Chair Johnson. Two questions, and one, first of all, about resources. And what I'm curious about is, are you finding you're adequately resourced in both time to complete your time and time to engage people like you've engaged on this campus? And not so much, can you have enough money to get the job done, but maybe share some frank thoughts about, do you have your resources, and do the people you're interacting with have the time to get this done right amongst their many and your many competing priorities? And then secondly, maybe you could say a little bit about how a strategic plan helps us allocate resources across the system. So I noticed under your slide 144, that middle "and" category, collaborating and cooperating rather than competing, because in this day and age, we just don't have the resources from the state or any other arm of our funding world to be competing too much for that. So do those two make sense?
Dr. Lemke?
Chair Johnson, Regent McMillan, do we have enough resources to do this? I can answer that in all kinds of ways. I think what's really important for you to hear is we've never had these conversations since I've been here, and I've been here 10 years, and I know they haven't happened before. This conversation will not end in June when you approve a report. In fact, what you will see from us is a plan to perpetuate this conversation and these strategies. So I don't think we're going to get it all done by June, but hopefully we've shaped the conversations and laid out a path and a direction that's going to enable the next group to really continue this effort. And it's why I think it's really important that the Board of Regents be engaged in this in the appropriate way to keep the energy to keep this moving forward. So I don't know if we need more resources now. I'm just hoping that you're willing to commit additional resources and your time and energy and attention on this moving forward. In terms of helping the board make decisions on investment and based on this plan, we hope that we are able to do that, and we see that as a task that is unfolding. If you would look at the work plan, we're still developing it. We get down to more specifics and some specific ideas and actions that people will need to follow. And in terms of investing in the system, if you look at the theory of action, one, if you recognize as a principle our special role in the state. Secondly, if you recognize the value of having distinctiveness and that the campuses should be required to demonstrate and plan for that distinctiveness, and that needs to be communicated. And then you can see how all of that sort of connects together. And you have to look at duplication, and you have to look at competition. Those should be some principles that I would think could help assist members of the board to make these kinds of decisions, and that's where we're trying to get.
President Kaler.
Thank you, Chair Johnson. I would just add on the resource issue, what is emerging is that we do need someone whose job it is every day to think about the system, at least in a reasonably short term as we begin to pull a comb through all of the tangles. That's a position that we don't currently have, so we will have to rearrange some resources to make that happen so that we get the full benefit of the good work that is coming forward. Chancellor Lemke also mentioned a rubric that helps us sort investments. That will also need to be developed and then actually implemented and have that be an informed part of our overall budgeting. So there will be work to be done, considerable work to be done, even as the plan, this phase of the planning, I would say, comes to conclusion in June.
Thank you. Regent Anderson.
Chair Johnson, thank you. I just want to say I'm impressed with what you've done, Vice Provost, Chancellor Lemke. I think, we've been talked, or I didn't, but Regent Rocha had talked about doing this system-wide plan for a long time, and I really didn't know what it was going to entail. But when I see what you're doing, I see some things. I get to your theory of action for the system, and you get to a point that says develop stronger collaborations and minimize internal competition. It reminds me of when I was running business, and I always wanted to enhance revenue and contain costs. And I think that's really what that says there in some ways, in that we can have students that if we are, and it happened before I got on this board, but I think of the program of VetFast, which is veterinary medicine on the St. Paul campus. From what I understand is the dean wasn't really for it. What he said, if you go to a system campus like Crookston and go at a proficiency level, you automatically can get admitted to the veterinarian program. And he wasn't really for it, but we needed vet students, and eventually he has told me those are his best students coming now that go through the VetFast program, because we teach them in undergrad what we want them to learn later. And yesterday I saw, so in that type of program, a couple of the big issues out there in the public right now are student debt, cost of education. If we can get some of those students to go to a less costlier campus, but then know they can come to graduate school at the university, we can enhance our revenues at those campuses, we can cost contain for the families, and we can get a pipeline of students coming to the university. And I just heard a presentation yesterday on pharmacy. They have a pharmacy graduate program here in Duluth, and it's a 4+4. I don't know the provost in the back, but I don't know all the merits of pharmacy, but there's potentially pharmacy kids could go to Rochester or Morris or Crookston and be admitted to the pharmacy program. So I see great potential in the real world that we can recognize this and do a good job. So thank you for your work.
Thank you. Regent Beeson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would echo the comments that my colleagues had mentioned, and Regent Rocha for raising this issue a year ago. You know, if we think this is a challenge, think about our colleagues at Minnesota State with 42 campuses and how you try to create a system out of that far-flung empire. In a way, these campuses, the physical assets are silos. And one of the takeaways I'm hearing from you, the power of relationships and networks and people are really where we want this to, you know, among and between the campuses, with the communities, with the stakeholders, really relationships. And instead of getting away from the sort of control issues of this department, this college, this institute, that campus, and a free flow of ideas. I was at the table last night with Mr. Weberg from NRI. He said, you know, I'm going to hire somebody whose job it is to walk around my staff and talk to every scientist and try to yield a commercial idea out of that. And so it's connecting dots, and that's a relationship based. I'm glad we're talking about maybe somebody at the system level, bringing somebody at the system level to facilitate a network or a connector of the dots that can help implement where this looks like it's going. Thank you for your work.
I'm going to call on a number of regents here, then we'll have you conclude with clarification comments, okay? Regent Hsu.
Thank you, Chair Johnson. I'm actually disappointed in the direction that we're going here, because I think maybe I'm failing to understand what a connector plan is, but I really think we need to have some. We live in a very challenging higher ed world, and we can't do everything everywhere. We really need to rationalize what we're doing, and we need to focus on the unique things that we can do as a university to help serve the state of Minnesota. I am happy to see the word invest on page 144, because I think that's really what we need to understand. And we're going through, we're going to approve another budget for another year in June, and I don't think we have any real idea of where we want to go or where we need to go as an institution. And I think that's frankly our job as a board to understand that. You know, I quoted Warren Buffett yesterday. I'll quote him again today. The most important job of a board is the allocation of capital. Where do we need to invest to make our university better and better serve the state of Minnesota? That's my interpretation of that. And I think without having our CFO, our new CFO, COO involved in this process is a problem also, and I've stated that before. I really do think we need to understand what our financial future is, and I think he's off developing another plan. In fact, in our retreat 2 days ago, we had a discussion about the financial future of the university. And I really don't see how that can be divorced from this process. And I really don't see how we're going to get anything really useful in another month or two. So I guess I'm challenging us to maybe take some more time and look into some of these things, because I really do think, you know, having not had a system-wide strategic plan in some time, I think the last one might have been in the 90s. We need to make sure we get this right, and we shouldn't be rushing through it. So thank you.
Regent Hsu, if I may, could you give me an example of your, I'm not disagreeing or agreeing necessarily with your line of thinking, can you give me an example, a practical example of on your comment?
Which part of my comment?
The first, I'm disappointed.
Well, I mean, we're talking about a framework. I mean, you guys are developing a framework. That's part of maybe what we need to execute a strategic plan. But tell me what the plan is first before you tell me what the framework is and how you decided to come up with the framework. What do we want to, show me what we want to be in 10 years, in 20 years, and then we can think about how we need to work to get there. Do we need to have various disciplines on various campuses? Do we, how are we going to deal with the administrative cost issue across all the campuses? How are we going to invest in, well, one of the key things that I think is maybe an issue later today is how are we going to deal with the structural imbalances on various campuses? For example, should we be investing more state money? We get the state money and we need to put it in various places, and we need to make decisions on which campuses the money needs to go to. So one question is, should we be investing more in Duluth or less in Duluth? I think the answer is more in Duluth, but I don't sense that what you're going to give us is going to help us understand what we need to do there. And as we have a budget cycle and a budget that has to be approved in June, I think we need to know, we need to have a better idea of that. I don't want to be sitting here in another year and say, oh, we shouldn't have put that money over there because really we need it over here. We have all sorts of programs that I think, if we look closely at them, are not adding the value that we need to add to the university. We need to make a decision on whether or not we need to continue those or invest more money in those. And without some type of way of looking at that, I just think we're not really doing our jobs and not able to make correct decisions in a couple months.
Very good. Thank you. Regent Powell.
Chancellor, Vice Provost, Mr. Chair, thank you for the report. I think you outlined for me, a newcomer, the process very clearly. I appreciate the breadth of stakeholder input and the search for connections. And as has just been said by Regent Chu, I also think strategy is one of the two most important things that that the President's office and the board is responsible for. So this is really a crucial topic. So the question I have, and I think President Kaler, this may be for you, and I'm seeking clarification. It's where in the process does the President and the President's team sort of enter the discussion in the sense that ultimately leaders, I think, are going to have to make choices about how we go forward. Leaders are going to have to define what the key issues are system-wide and by site. Leaders are going to have to set priorities. Leaders are going to have to make choices, and some of the choices are going to be very tough. And that really is, in many ways, the hardest part of the exercise. And so my question is how, where do you enter, President Kaler and your team enter the process, and where do we start seeing these choices defined so that the board can make a call one way or another?
Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Chair Johnson, Regent Powell. I have been involved in this process throughout in an advising way and an inputting way. We've met with the group several times. So this, again, is in my view, a process. What we are aiming to do is help the system work more effectively, and I think this is an outline to do that. Once we have that in place, then we'll be able to make smarter decisions in allocating to the various campuses and extension and other things that are done in the state, because we'll be able to sort of de-silo those elements. And we make those kind of decisions all the time. That's how the budget process works. But I see this really as another cut or another lens to view that resource allocation process with other multiple elements of the system in the conversation. And so we will do that as we implement this plan to connect and enable our units to work together more effectively.
Regent Rocha for comment, and then concluding comments, if we may. Regent Rocha.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mr. Chair. A lot of good stuff in this conversation. I want to move to a moment to what Regent Beeson mentioned, and I think it's a great setup for the importance of this product. You talked about Minnesota State colleges, Minnesota State now, and what a challenge that is to pull that together as a system. But when you look at what they are sort of wired to do, it shows how important it is for us to have a strategic plan that differentiates from what that system is fundamentally doing. And this is important not just to be the most effective land-grant university we can be, but also to demonstrate our value to the community and get the support we need from the state. Chancellor Lemkuhl, your last comments, or your comments in response to Regent McMillan's point, that was the most helpful to me in this process. And I have great appreciation for the vastness of what it is you have set out to do as a leadership team, and I appreciate those efforts. I take a bit of a different tack than my colleague Regent Hsu in trying to identify how you can best help us. One of the challenges I have is we're not really part of this process on a day-to-day basis, and so understanding what each of us individually is sort of perceiving as the appropriate format for a strategic plan, it's a bit of a pick-em for you, and I want to push a little bit and say that I really want to ensure that we're not vesting ourselves at a place of strategic goals, but of a strategic plan. Because the things that we identify in saying we want to be more diverse or we want to serve the community better, not going to disagree with you, but that doesn't really give me a clear picture when I look at the budget in June and say, yes, this is the kind of investment we ought to be making. This also goes a little bit to what Regent Hsu had talked about in that very respect. For instance, is it a priority for us to look at the Duluth campus, and this is such a fitting setting for the conversation, to look at it and say, based on the demographics, its role as a regional school, and some of the population pressures perhaps at the Twin Cities, we are going to invest heavily in X because we want to grow that competency at this campus. These are the kinds of things a strategic plan really needs to provide us guidance so that when we do look out 20 years or 10 years, we know that we're heading in a direction that makes a lot of sense. Because otherwise, and this goes a bit to what the President was just saying, every independent budget decision is its own strategic plan. And while I think that we have competence and we've ultimately got a remarkable institution despite not having had this kind of clarity for quite some time, I think that we really start firing on more cylinders if we do have that understanding. And this goes to Regent Powell's point. I think that the work the baseline work that has been done is critical and absolutely fundamental to coming through with this process. But at the end of the decision, it's going to be a recommendation by our administration that works for this board, and we're going to say, yes, this, as the elected representatives of the people of this great state, this is the strategic plan that we are going to employ to reach our maximum potential as a land-grant university to serve this state. So that may be throwing a lot at you, and again, we haven't had a chance to really to individually communicate about this. But I don't want to at all diminish what's been presented, because I don't think we can get to where I'm talking about without what you have provided. But as we go over, and it is a short time hack to try to be ready by June with something that gets to the level of clarity that I think is appropriate. But so I don't want to sort of throw us off track with that. But that may have to be a continuing conversation to get us that level of competence in a document that will help guide not just us, but future members of this board as that continuously gets reviewed and developed as we perform our role as a board.
Thank you. Brief summation, please, for a grade of A.
Chair John, just real quick, is what we really presented to you today is what I would call a strategic framework. And we're going to work really hard to get to your strategic plan. But we may need to continue to do this work beyond. So what you may approve, or what we're able to provide you in June or May be a strategic framework or part of the strategic plan, but I think we'll give you a strategy of how to move forward. So I'm trying to be real honest, just given resources that we have, the time that we have, but I hopefully, at least I see this framework as being absolutely foundational to making those decisions. So we've got to get that right, and that's what we've been focusing on.
Vice Provost, concluding comments, please.
Sure. Thank you, Chair Johnson. So I would just say thank you all for your comments and your suggestions, your questions. As happened in December, they will guide us going forward. I will say that there is more specificity already in the plan than what we've presented today in various areas. So I think we're heading in the direction that is implied by some of the questions already. Also, we have not yet refused a meeting with anyone to talk about this plan, so I'm just putting that out there. And second, I'm sitting in a very different leadership position than you all are, admittedly. But what I will say is that the conversations we have already had with people across the state performing various functions have informed my leadership practice already. So I think one of the benefits of this plan is going to be, yes, strategic intentions and ways to go forward and specifics around that, but it's also going to be that we're using this plan as a conduit to hopefully tell you what people around the state are feeling and thinking about the University of Minnesota and its future. And so I hope that this board will be open to both sides, both the specific strategies and specific directions, as well as to listening to what we've had the privilege to listen to about how to make our system both higher quality as well as more efficient and more collaborative.
Very good. Thank you very, very much for your efforts. Most appreciated. And now, community engagement of UMD, Duluth, and the Northland, presented by Chancellor Black, Vice Chancellor Delgado, and Vice Chancellor Irwin. Thank you very much for your efforts as well. Chancellor Black.
Good morning, Chair Johnson, members of the board, President Kaler. As I said to you yesterday, probably more than once, it is certainly an honor for us to have you on our campus. And I think I speak for my Chancellor colleagues that we're all thrilled that we're having a Board of Regents meeting on a system campus. This morning, our presentation will focus on academics and community engagement, on students, community engagement, and on administration and community partners. We will leave time at the end of our presentation to answer your questions and to follow up on any additional details that interest you. One of the primary goals for me since becoming Chancellor of the University of Minnesota Duluth in August of 2010 has been and continues to be having close and productive relations and partnerships with local and regional communities. We are constantly working with government officials, with our higher education partners in the Twin Ports and in the Northland, to enhance the educational attainment, the economic resiliency, and the overall quality of life in this region of Minnesota. And as you will hear this morning, UMD faculty, staff, and students are investing their talents, their expertise, and time to truly make a significant difference in this community. I'm now pleased to turn the next section of our presentation over to UMD's Executive Vice Chancellor for Academic Affairs, Dr. Fernando Delgado.
Very good. Thank you, Chancellor. Chancellor Delgado.
Chair Johnson, Board, good morning, and thank you for the opportunity to speak on behalf of the academic component of UMD. UMD's faculty and research units are profoundly engaged with regional and state communities. In many respects, the organizing theme within academic affairs has centered around UMD serving as the key asset to the Northland. We strive to reinforce UMD's value through our academic and research capabilities to help build student opportunities, a healthy regional economy, and thriving communities in this part of Minnesota and beyond. We do this through our connections in part with business and industry. The Natural Resource Research Institute, NRRI, and Center for Economic Development are clearly two UMD entities whose purpose is to make a profound and positive impact on the region and beyond. You can see the reach and impact of both units across the state. These two units, like UMD's 5 academic colleges, are positively affecting the quality of life and culture of the Northland, the state of Minnesota, and the region. Their collective work impacts various business and industry sectors in the region. For example, NRRI and the CED partner to provide expertise to encourage innovation and commercialization of new technology through the NRRI Business Assistance Fund. The CED partnered with the Natural Resource Research Institute to assess the viability commercial opportunities for major regional initiatives, and innovation with larger businesses. During the 2016 year, the CED Small Business Development Center actively engaged and assisted 980 businesses, mainly across the northern one-third of Minnesota. The CED coordinated and hosted a forum to support veterans who want to start businesses with the Veteran Administration and the U.S. Small Business Administration. The CED Student to Business Initiative connects business students with local businesses to address needs and identify solutions. This last fall, 132 students worked with 21 local businesses in the Duluth area. Beyond the specialized foci of NRI and CED, UMD's faculty are also committed to making positive differences. Faculty in the Swenson College of Science and Engineering are developing materials and advanced materials through our Advanced Materials Center for new products and processes that will solve regional challenges, build product lines, and foster new companies, as well as advancing 3D printing innovations that will revolutionize aerospace and other manufacturing industries, and providing a new workforce training program to align our students with emerging opportunities. But despite our work with industries, UMD's faculty and researchers are keenly engaged in talent development and outreach beyond that narrow confine. For example, UMD faculty and staff take seriously our partnership with K-12 providers. We recognize the need to assure that students are inspired to pursue their goals through higher education, and that we must reach out to them early and often. Our engagement with K-12 partners includes the umbrella under the umbrella of outreach includes Swenson students, faculty, and staff who are engaged at a variety of levels with organizations in the region, such as school districts in Duluth, Cloquet, Esco, Superior, as well as those on the Iron Range. Over 170 science and engineering lessons will have been executed in the Duluth School District alone over the course of the 2016-17 year. The Science on Deck program opens the Large Lake Observatory's Blue Heron to children and adults for tours and opportunities to learn about science, water, and its impact on our lives. Nearly 600 individuals participated this past summer. The Fine Arts Academy provides high-quality arts instruction to infants, children, and even adults through lessons and workshops across the year. The Allworth Planetarium has provided programming to the community for 50 years. The recent addition of the Match Portable Geodome Theater allows our faculty and staff to bring the planetarium experience to schools in the area. In 2016 alone, planetarium attendance was more than 13,000, and upwards of 5,000 K-12 students attended Geodome events. Finally, UMD faculty and staff are deeply committed to improving our communities. Students and faculty are working directly with local companies to improve their energy efficiency and sustainability through Duluth Shines, a partnership that allows students and faculty to work directly with small to mid-sized businesses to assess and improve their energy footprint. Professor Adam Pine has examined food deserts in the Duluth community and has tied his research, published in his recent book, Confronting Hunger in America, with community involvement to make a positive difference in West Duluth. This has resulted in a Duluth Transit Authority project to connect residents with affordable and appropriate food options. The Sustainable Agriculture Project on the UMD field station, collaborates with a plethora of regional organizations while feeding students at UMD. The farm provides a deep learning and research environment that is connected across several academic programs and colleges, and the project supports education and training for the community and those interested in organic and sustainable food sourcing in the Duluth region. The Swenson faculty and NRI researchers are working on an array of projects, including monitoring the cleanup of the St. Louis River estuary, partnering with the mining industry to clean up impacted water and soil and converting to more environmentally friendly processes, recycling of mine tailings to use them for cleanup and further economic gain, and converting the paper industry to production of biochemicals using wood biomass for generation of biofuels and other environmentally friendly products. The Leibovitz School of Business and Economics Volunteer Income Tax Assistance Program provides tax return preparation services for low and moderate income residents in the Duluth Superior area. Students participating in the VITA program as a credit-bearing course prepared 600 tax returns this past year, resulting in total refunds of $600,000. Faculty in social work received a federal grant from the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services to create a better delivery system for the Indian Child Welfare Act, thus helping us deliver in part on our promise to Indian country in this part of the state. Boulder Lake Environmental Learning Center, our 18,000-acre outdoor classroom 18 miles north of Duluth, is a partnership with Minnesota Power, St. Louis County Land and Minerals Department, in conjunction with additional foundation support. Over 10,000 children, educators, researchers, and community members visit each year to immerse themselves in nature to explore, discover, and learn. Last night, the President said it's our job to prove that we're indispensable, and we do that every day because we don't take that for granted. So I thank you for your time and attention. We are proud of our work, but this is only one facet of UMD's impact. I'll turn it over to Dr. Lisa Irwin, who will provide even richer detail.
Very good. Thank you very much. Chancellor Irwin.
Thank you, Chair Johnson. Regents, I'm honored to have the chance to talk about the many ways that our UMD students are engaged with our Duluth and communities and beyond. So let's start with internships and co-ops. One significant way that Bulldogs engage in the Duluth, regional, and Minnesota communities and beyond is through internships and co-op experiences. On the screen is Kiersey Cootie, a senior in electrical engineering from Duluth. And this picture of Kiersey was taken during her internship with NASA. From our graduate follow-up survey, we know that the number of graduates who complete internship or co-op experiences has steadily increased over the past 5 years. In our most recent data, which was in 2015, we learned that 49% of our survey respondents indicated they had completed an internship. That's up from 42% in 2011. And as you know, an internship experience is a powerful predictor of employment. The number of respondents receiving an offer after their internship or co-op ed experience has also increased over the past 5 years. In 2015, 41% of our respondents to the survey received an offer. And of those, 56% accepted their offer. This next slide shows Tori Greb, who completed an internship with Hormel, and she's a senior from Austin, Minnesota. She's majoring in management. And finally, these students are preparing for one of our many job fairs. Our engagement with employers across the state is evidenced by the satisfaction they express about our job fair opportunities, but even more importantly, by the way they rave about our students they meet at the fairs. So let's move to our relationships in the neighborhood. At UMD, we've worked really hard to improve our neighborhood relationships. Our programming with students focuses on the neighborhoods surrounding the campus, and there are many who live very close to campus. Our student association promotes and sponsors a Better Neighbors program, providing training to students who are preparing to move out from on-campus residence halls and apartments to living off campus. We hosted an annual community meeting, inviting our campus neighbors to discussions about what's happening on campus and what's on their mind. We held our 27th annual community meeting this past fall and heard from neighbors about a wide range of topics. Chancellor Black is an active participant in each of these community meetings, and it's a real testimony to his commitment to our relationships in Duluth. As the end of the semester approaches, we'll be gearing up for our furniture and trash pickup program, a partnership between sustainability and facilities management, students living near the campus but large items they no longer want or use on the curb, and facilities management trucks pick them up, and our neighbors are very happy. Sustainability provides large bins on the campus for students to bring unwanted items, clothing, and etc. for reuse and donation. We've also made great progress in student conduct, thanks to the careful work of this board, of you Regents, to provide us ways to adjudicate off-campus behavior. Over the past 5 years, we've been able to significantly reduce the number of second-time alcohol and social host offenses. That's because we're working with them the first time an incident happens. We've received many accolades for this work from our neighbors, from our landlords, from our community and city leadership, and from the Duluth Police. In terms of transportation, we have a host of transportation options for our students and other members of our community, and those are really evident of our engagement in Duluth. I'm excited to tell you about a brand new transportation option this school year. In fact, Mike Kenyanya, who spoke earlier, is one of the leaders that created the program. Transportation and Parking Services teamed up with the UMDSA to offer a car share program. After an RFP process, Enterprise was selected as our car share program partner. Students sign up to participate and then are able to reserve one of 2 cars for an hour or for a day. It's been a fantastic success, and Mike told me earlier this week that they're really hoping to add another car to the program. Our UPass program is a partnership between UMD and the Duluth Transit Authority. Students pay $10 for a semester for the program, which provides an unlimited number of rides. The UPass participation for riders in 2014-15 was over 450,000, which included 7,460 unique riders. And of those riders, 93% are students. We take special note of our benchmarks, and in February of last year, we celebrated our 6.5 millionth rider since September 2000. In 2001, the university partnered with the DTA on the Kirby Plaza project, which included the construction of a bus hub that serves the entire community, but especially our students, faculty, and staff. The Bulldog Taxi program has been in place for a number of years. The program was the brainchild of the UMD Student Association and originally started as a Safe Ride program. But today the program serves students in many different ways, and each student can save 50% on each cab ride they take in Duluth. The UMDSA continues to run the program, student-led, student-run, and we're very proud of their efforts, as well as the way the program has evolved over the years to meet student needs. And finally, I'm excited to tell you about the many contributions our Bulldogs make as volunteers. Kirby Student Center sponsors the Kirby Leadership Institute. This program focuses on experiential learning, and community service is a key component. To earn the Kirby Leadership Certificate, students are required to complete 250 hours of community service, and these hours are largely completed here in Duluth. UMD has over 270 registered student organizations, and many members of those groups are engaged in the Duluth community and beyond. We have 10 Greek life organizations, and those groups alone have logged over 7,000 hours of community service and volunteerism just this school year. So I've selected some examples. It's hard to get them all, but I've got some examples for you to take a look at today. Our residence halls host a community Halloween event each year. Residence hall student groups create stations for kids and their families to make crafts and play games. In addition, hundreds of students provide opportunities for trick-or-treat. We see at least 1,000 people annually at that event. You see on the screen now the Alpha Delta fraternity, and this is another reason why we love living on a great lake. Here's a team taking the polar plunge in Lake Superior, an event that raised money for Special Olympics. Our multicultural student organizations offer events that draw in the community, providing a chance to learn about other cultures and countries. We have a host of wonderful events and traditions to include Africa Night, Fiesta, Soul Food Dinner, Asia Pacific American Culture Show, and this slide features our recent Feast of Nations, sponsored by the International Student Club. You Matter is a mental health awareness group that focuses on suicide prevention and supporting those who have been affected by suicide. Regent Powell, you alluded to prevention efforts previously, and I know you've heard about the importance of the support for mental health today. And this makes the engagement of student organizations like You Matter all the more important in our work. This photo is from their Stomp Out Suicide 5K, an event they held to raise awareness last fall. Just this past Saturday, the Society of Women Engineers hosted an event for 3rd, 4th, and 5th graders on our campus. Society students led hands-on activities that showed kids what it's like to be an engineer. They put children's creativity and problem-solving skills to the test in the Civil Engineering Department's High Bay Laboratory. The Veterans Club prepares meals for fellow vets of the VFW. The Environmental Science Club devotes their community service hours to repairing and remediating area trails and to mitigate invasive species in area waters. And lastly, here's a photo of several members of Gamma Sigma Sigma after the conclusion of their walk to end Alzheimer's. So finally, I'll conclude with the work of our student athletes. We are truly UMD proud of our athletics department commitment to what they refer to as the 3 C's: classroom, community, and competition. And here are a few highlights for their focus. UMD student athletes and staff logged approximately 2,100 volunteer hours during the 2015-16 school year. And they launched a new mentoring program at Duluth's Laura MacArthur Elementary School, matching young boys and girls with 88 Bulldogs. Members of the UMD tennis team undertook a first-time project, Bulldogs, Not Bullies, in which they visited classrooms at Duluth elementary schools and spoke to over 2,000 students about bullying. And as you can tell, as a diehard and a very proud resident of Bulldog Country, I'm going to stop with a beautiful video about our athletics program in Laura MacArthur Elementary.
So all semester, we've been mentoring with the Laura MacArthur Elementary School, showing up for their after-school program, their Key Zone program, and we want to put together a little party, end of the year.
Anne-Marie at Laura MacArthur explained that a lot of the kids have never been ice skating before, so we decided to try and rent the Heritage Sports Center, and it was a complete surprise. The kids had no idea. They just got on a bus after school. They thought they were kind of going on like a field trip, but they didn't know where, and so it kind of went off without a hitch, and all the kids really enjoyed it. So after the skating for about an hour, we kind of said, bye guys, thanks so much for coming. And so we all snuck upstairs to the balcony area and came through with Santa ringing bells and surprised them. UMD really emphasizes the classroom, the competition, but then the community also. And so the kids love it, but then the athletes love it just as much too.
Go Dogs.
As you've heard already, there are numerous examples of how our students, faculty, and staff are deeply engaged in the communities of Duluth and in the Northland. Locally, we have a close relationship with the other higher education institutions in the Twin Ports. One example of our partnership is the citywide Welcome Back Students campaign, which is sponsored by the Duluth Mayor's Office and involves us working together to welcome our students to the beginning of a new year. Also recently, we signed an academic partnership agreement with the College of St. Scholastica and the University of Wisconsin-Superior. Another prime example of community partnership is the Bluestone development on Woodland Avenue just across the street and east of campus. You experienced this development firsthand Wednesday evening at Regent McMillan's reception at Bluestone Flats. In 2012, I and other members of the University of Minnesota Duluth administration were approached by developer Mark Lambert about his plans to purchase the former Woodland Middle School property and to convert part of that property into a mixed-use development. Early on, Mark described his vision as a mini Dinkytown. Mark was seeing this as a way to further meet the demands for student housing and to create retail that serves UMD, the College of St. Scholastica, and the neighborhoods close to campus. As you can see, this development was to serve not only UMD, but also St. Scholastica and other housing needs in this area. As he developed plans for Bluestone, Mark was a good collaborator, and he sought our opinions about what would work best on this site to meet the demands of our students and the campus community. For example, he denied a request from a local liquor store to put one of its stores in one of the retail spaces because we were concerned, and he was concerned, about having a liquor store on the site, same site as student housing. This is an overview of the development. Phase 1 included housing that opened in 2013. It was entitled Bluestone Lofts. It has 293 bedrooms in 93 apartment units. And it's occupied, about 60% of the occupation is students. The other 40% is a variety of professionals and families of different sizes, and also senior citizens. Phase 2 of housing opened in 2016. It's called Bluestone Flats, which is where Regent McMillan lives. There are 197 bedrooms and 142 units in this property. Also, if you look at this slide, on the other side of Woodland, on our side of Woodland, from College Street up to Elizabeth Street, UMD now owns all the properties on our side of the street except for one. There is still one piece of property and a house. Otherwise, over the years, we have purchased the other properties. We have leveled a number of houses. And so we do have some options looking forward in the future with future master planning in terms of potential uses for that property. So even though we did agree with Mark on a number of areas, there was some disagreement as well. In particular, Mark was aware of a proposed street that was to be cut into the UMD campus that was part of a previous UMD master plan from a number of years ago. This street would come off of Woodland Avenue and go right into the center of campus. He felt that this street would be a good intersection, that it would enhance his retail options on his property. But we were not so much in favor of this street, cutting a road into campus. We felt it would sacrifice several recreational fields and would divide the campus in a way that we felt was unnecessary. So instead, we advocated for a pedestrian and bike path which links the campus to the development in a much less obtrusive way and a much more sustainable way. Mark eventually supported this concept, and we were glad to partner on it, and I think it's been a great success. In addition to what you've heard already about sustainability, we do sponsor sustainable energy workshops throughout the community, including industry, scientists, and other community partners. We also support the Lake Superior Harvest Fest, various energy and sustainability fairs, and a Bag It education event which aims to reduce plastic pollution and promote reusing plastics. Public safety is another major success story in our collaboration with the community, and it exemplifies the good collaborations we have in the area. The UMD Police Department enhances its effectiveness for the UMD community and its neighbors in several ways. First, it has strong internal partnerships with UMD's Office of Student Life, Office of Diversity and Inclusion, Office of Residence Life, and the Department of Athletics. Second, it is involved with local community groups working to improve safety and the quality of life in our area, such as the Sexual Assault Multidisciplinary Action and Response Team, the Arrowhead Cross Infrastructure Public Safety Group, and the Tri-Campus and Community Coalition on Student Drinking. UMDPD has excellent relationships with local public safety agencies, particularly with the Duluth Police Department. And oftentimes, our police department will actually help cover incidents and events and emergencies if the Duluth Police Department needs assistance. They also partner well with the Duluth Fire Department, St. Louis County Sheriff's Office, and the Gold Cross Ambulance Service. Finally, I'd like to point out that UMD spends over $20 million a year with local and regional merchants and service providers. We feel that patronizing our local and regional business community makes good business sense and strengthens our community relations. Purchasing products and services locally also builds a camaraderie with the local business community so that they often go the extra mile in helping us in meeting our needs, especially when a part or a service is needed quickly in response to an emergency. The ability to use local design and construction professionals not only helps the Duluth economy, but it also results in lower costs for the university. For example, we just opened bids for replacement of the Griggs field track where we had received 4 bids. The one from the local contractor was about $150,000 less than the lowest bids from a Twin Cities contractor. So thank you again for your attention today and for inviting us to present on this topic. We are pleased to answer your questions and discuss areas that are most interesting to you.
Very good, Chancellor Black and Chancellor Delgado and Chancellor Irwin, for your comments, your enthusiasm about UMD, Duluth, and the North Country. Comments, questions, briefly from Regents. Regent Rocha.
Chair, I'd like to call on Regent McMillan.
Regent McMillan, this is your opportunity to shine.
Thank you, Chair Johnson. I will only note that I sure appreciate the Vice Chancellor's choice of attire, and would note that I followed bylaw section F, paragraph 4, that says no flag, banner, sign, or other matter shall be worn by a regent. So I refrained, but thank you, Chancellor Irwin.
Do the Bulldogs have a game today?
Chair Johnson, we have a game today. 5:30 p.m. ESPNU, we're facing Ohio State.
Your enthusiasm is great. Regent Omari.
Thank you, Chair Johnson. She promised me a jersey yesterday, so I'll be waiting on that. He said him too.
Under the code of ethics, we cannot receive gifts.
I'm giving this pen back. Thank you for the presentation. You know, I think I'm always very struck by the misunderstanding or confusion between engagement, community engagement, and community service. And higher education has a tradition that is not always a good one of service in a way of going in and trying to solve people's problems or be the healer or the fixer, and then removing themselves and going away. And it's a model that I'm glad to see is not happening at our campus, because the notion of engagement is a notion of reciprocity, and we do things together, we create the projects together. I don't tell you what you need and then come in and fix it. And so I'm really excited about this presentation and the work that's being done around engagement and not service.
Good. Thank you.
Other comments? Other comments? Chancellor Black, you've said it all, and you've done a wonderful job here in UMD, and we most appreciate, again, being here with you and your faculty and staff and students. Very good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next, I'd like to invite Senior Vice President Burnett and Associate Vice President Tonneson forward to discuss the fiscal year 2018 budget framework. President Kaler, would you like to begin with some brief remarks?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and members of the board. In one way or another, we've been discussing the FY 2018 budget at every board meeting since September. In September, I remind you, we conducted a work session on budget assumptions. In October, budget levers were part of a lengthy discussion. In December, you received the annual financial report. In February, you heard an operational excellence update. And now Senior Vice President for Finance and Operations Burnett and Associate Vice President for Budget and Finance Tonneson will present our FY 18 budget framework, including revenue and investment options for you to consider. This conversation around our framework forms the basis for our annual operating budget. You will give us guidance today. We will review it, and then you as a board act on it later in the spring. The framework will guide us as we move forward with a budget that keeps the university affordable for all qualified students, that allows us to be competitive with our peers, and that maintains our excellence. So with that, Brian, Julie, please.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. Burnett, Ms. Tonneson, thank you for being here with us at UMD, and please proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Julie and I are pleased to bring you today our thinking and move quickly through the framework for next year's budget for the institution, the operating budget. And as you understand, there's a lot still in play between the legislative piece and, of course, tuition decisions to be made. Before I begin, I wanted to say also this week my gratitude to Julie and Mike Volna and others being at the Capitol while I've been up here with the board this week. They've spent some late nights at the Capitol helping JD, and as some of you have seen firsthand, as a new person to the U, having Julie by your side at legislative testimony is really helpful, and her experience and the way she conducts herself is something that we should all be very proud of. So, Julie, thank you for all the work you do and continue to do and will continue to do. So, with that, we want to walk through the framework summary to talk about our variable and strategic costs that we see coming ahead, the new resources, hopefully, that we have to talk about in June, and repurposed resources. Julie?
All right. To remind you all of how the framework fits into the overall budget planning cycle, we offer this graphic. We're focusing in on one component today of the budget cycle, and that's the annual operating budget for FY18. The information you see today and that we're going to talk about has been informed by elements of the long-range financial plan that you reviewed last fall. And additionally, it includes assumptions and options based on the biennial budget request we submitted to the state for the next biennium. But to set the stage for this conversation about what we call the budget framework, it's important to understand how all the funding sources for the university are considered in this process.
And we talked about this a little bit earlier in the week about different types of funds that are available to help carry out the mission, the very disparate missions of the University of Minnesota across our campuses and across the state. And this is just a reminder of the different types of funding. And obviously, tuition and state support are the two big ones. But of course, indirect cost recoveries, auxiliary revenues that we get, sponsored project funds, those are all what makes up about what we see as a $3.8 billion budget. But as you know, not all the funds can be used for all purposes, and we'll detail that here.
Yeah, before we get to that specifically, many of you have seen this graph before. This is just a picture of what we mean when we talk about the budget framework. And it is really nothing more than a very high-level set of variables that we plan around to balance the budget. So we ask ourselves, what changes do we need or can we make to our resources, particularly tuition, state appropriation, and planned reallocations, in order to pay for increased costs for compensation, academic and other mission support investments, facility costs, and so forth. This is essentially a base plus minus part of the process at a very high level. So it's a planning around these variables in balancing the budget. But as Brian, I think, walked through with you the other day, revenues are different in this process.
So this is a graphic we talked about at the retreat on Wednesday, and Regent Omari were not able to see it, but basically this is a graphic that I've put together over time, just showing that from a stoplight connotation, there's different variabilities of restrictions on the revenue that we have. And a lot of times we get caught up in the pie being 3.5, 3.6 billion, but really the key decisions, the key functions that are made are in this green bucket are the most unrestricted revenues we have, the tuition that our schools earn, the state support, O&M appropriations that the state give us are the unrestricted dollars that we can solve problems and put towards any use generally. The yellow auxiliary funds, like our parking systems, our athletic department, our residential life programs on the campuses, those are yellow because you've got to be careful about the investments you might pull out of those. They should cover their costs, and they should provide a piece of the overhead, their share of the overhead, if they're operating in a business-like manner. Our bookstores would be in here as well. And then to the right, as you move on that spectrum, 95 to 98% of the gifts that come to the university, which we're very grateful for, come with a designation by the donor. You can't just take those gifts and do something else with them because you have a need over here. So we move them on the spectrum to the right. And then, of course, to the far right, sponsored projects from either the federal government or the state government, but largely for this university, the federal government, are the most restrictive because you've taken money with the agreement that you're going to produce a product back. When we spend that, we do collect indirect cost recoveries, and that's that bar in the top right, and that does come back to reimburse the institution for the costs of maintaining the research infrastructure. So you can kind of see that there's this push to try and get as much into the unrestricted side to give you more maneuvering room from a budget perspective, and I hope that's helpful to you. All those buckets are not the same size, and for the system as a whole, this is what it looks like. So sponsored dollars, the dark red, is about 16% of that $3.5 billion. The red is 20%. The auxiliaries is 10%. Just 10% of the institution. And then 41% is O&M and state appropriation. And then 13% is really unrestricted money, but it's managed by the units in our RCM model, and it's available to the units to put towards their use, like clinical income from UMP, that type of thing. So just showing this graphic, where we really spend a great deal of time working with the board and the campuses is balancing really those green buckets, because those are where the levers are on tuition and state support, and to do the majority of the things that we'll talk about in the investments here.
Right, so the framework again is really focused on that darker green part of the pie chart, and I don't want to leave you with the impression that in the budgeting process we ignore all of the rest of that pie chart. We do not, but the primary decisions and variables that we have discretion over are in the green area. So we wanted to start talking specifically about FY18 next year, and we wanted to share the cost components of the framework first. Last year, when we did this in March, we found it useful to talk about costs in terms of those that are required versus variable, and then also strategic investment pools. You can see here the general costs that we plan for in the framework in each of those categories. At this point, we can talk about them more specifically for FY18. In the required cost category are things that we face in varying amounts every year. These are our current estimates for cost increases for FY18, totaling just over $6 million. Again, incremental on top of this year. For utilities, that is primarily driven, the largest portion of that is on the Twin Cities campus, and is actually because of new space that we are opening up. It's not a cost increase on our existing space, but primarily on new space. For new building operations, that does not include utilities. That includes custodial, maintenance, land care, and so forth for new space that is opening up. For debt, over the next 2 years, this is largely driven by land purchases that have been made, and then there are a few projects in there as well. We can go into detail on that if you wish. Contractual licensing, this is technology. This involves licensing and maintenance costs for the enterprise PeopleSoft systems, site licensing of Microsoft products, and maintenance on servers, video conferencing, and so forth. Again, this is a cost increase every year. It does vary. This happens to be a little bit on the low side for FY18. The network upgrade, I will talk about it again in a future slide, but it is listed here as the O&M portion as a required cost based on the decisions that have been made to date. And then the financial aid, this piece is really not a choice. This is our commitment to match the payout on prior gifts that were given. That program has ended, but we continue to have to match payouts from a past campaign where we committed to do so. So this is an estimated cost increase for those payouts for next year. A second category of costs then is the variable costs. These we separated out because they are for critical items that we face on a regular basis in these categories, but there are choices to be made each year that influence the impact on the budget. And we want to start with compensation. Oh, there we go. For FY18, to provide a 2% increase in salaries across all employee groups would cost $62.2 million across all of our funds, $34.5 million in the framework funds of O&M and tuition, which generally holds 55 to 60% of our total compensation costs. $11.7 million of this 34.5 is fringe alone. So even without a salary increase, we will have to pay an increase of $11.7 million. This does not reflect a change in our benefit offerings or our packages. It actually reflects a bouncing back from a rate that was held down this year, you might recall, due to the settlement funds from a proven overpayment of pharmacy benefits in past years. That settlement was put in to offset costs in FY15 in the ledger, which has an impact of reducing our fringe costs 2 years later this year, but they will bounce back up next year and the following year. Another way to look at this for the framework funds specifically for FY18, fringe alone is $11.7 million, as I just mentioned. Each 1% increase in salary on top of that adds $11.4 million in O&M and tuition. We are showing a 2% cost increase here because that is very much what we'd like to do.
This next chart shows some recent data that we pulled together just about where salaries are looking in markets we compete in, but also in the area. And I think that, when we think about a 2% pool, it's staying close to inflation. It's certainly not a robust pool by any stretch, but I think it's something that we need to reward our hardworking staff and faculty across our system and at least keep them on pace with inflation and not have their earning power diminish. And so we're building in a conservative 2% pool, but we think it's critical for our workforce across the entire system.
And last year we did highlight a couple of compensation-related issues that we knew were going to impact next year's budget. The first I've already mentioned, and that's the bounce back of the fringe costs. The second is a potential change the state is proposing right now for the Minnesota State Retirement System. The employer contribution under this proposal would increase from 5.5% to 7% in FY18. A cost across all of our funds that would be $6.5 million, $3 million in O&M, which includes tuition. The employee contributions would also go up from 5.5 to 6%, and then there's another bump on the employer side in FY20 from 7% to 8%. The impact of this is spread across our units differentially based on the employees that they happen to have in their unit and the funding sources. So we have not to this point, and it hasn't passed yet, but we have not to this point included it in the $34.5 million estimated cost for compensation. We would deal with it during the budget process instead, really through the investment part of the budget framework, and go in strategically to help units pay for this, where it is going to be a burden. So we don't know yet if it's going to pass, though. Moving to other variable costs, here we will talk about repairs and renovations, the network upgrade, which was included, I realize, in the required category summary, but we'll mention it again here, and then financial aid. For R&R, we increased the system-wide funds dedicated to repairs and renovation by $2,250,000 this year in the FY17 budget. So it is now just under $11 million for the system. We would like to target another increase of $1 million for FY18, not because it's enough, but because it is a high priority that we don't want to ignore. And given the revenue constraints, we believe this is the largest increase we can reasonably shoot for. Adding that $1 million would allow us to average about 10 more critical projects than we otherwise would have been able to do, and helps us chip away a bit at the funding gap in the R&R area. The funds are distributed to each campus and each research and outreach center based on the HEAPR formula, which involves gross square footage and an element of 10-year need.
Go ahead.
As I mentioned, for the network upgrade, This was initially a variable cost choice when we first started talking about it, which is why it is placed here in the discussion. However, as the months have passed and approvals have been gained along the way, we can say this is really now a required cost. As we brought to the board in October, we plan to implement the roughly $400,000 of additional annual cost as shown on the second to the last line in this table as part of the annual budget for FY18. As the plan further called for, you will see the additional roughly $4 million per year, as shown just below the second thick black line, as part of the central reserves allocations that will be in the annual budget as well. And that comes from increased investment earnings generated by a change in how we are investing a portion of the temporary investment pool. And we talked about that several months ago, I can't remember which month, in the Finance Committee of the board.
And for Regents Powell and Regents Figham, we haven't had a chance to brief you on some things in the budget. This is redoing all of the networks, wireless networks, on the entire system, including as you walked around this campus yesterday. So this $70 million is for all 5 campuses, redoing their entire network around wireless. And there's a lot of dead spots across the campuses that we're going to try and pick up with this project. And so just to catch you up on that one, it's certainly something that our students and faculty expect as you walk across the campus.
And finally, related to variable costs, we want to mention the choices we have around our need-based aid program, the Promise Scholarship Program. As you recall, this program provides automatic aid to low and middle income Minnesota resident undergraduate students on all campuses. The award levels for the current year range from $306 to $4,134, which is scaled to family income. This year we increased the awards where we increased tuition, so on the Twin Cities campus, and we added a tier for all campuses for students from families with incomes in the $100,000 to $120,000 range. These awards are guaranteed for 8 semesters for incoming freshmen, 4 semesters for transfer students. For FY18, we can choose to leave the program as it is. The impact of that on students is unknown until we do understand what is happening with the Pell Awards and the Minnesota State Grant Program Awards. Students eligible for those awards may see increases in aid regardless of what we do with Promise. Or, as we have in the past, we can combine the impact of changes in those award programs with increases or changes in the Promise program to offset some or all of any of the tuition increment we might implement. The cost will obviously depend on the final decisions on the tuition rates, and we'll talk more about tuition in an upcoming slide. And finally, every year we have to plan to make strategic investments across the university. As you are aware, we have $26 million in new initiative requests before the state right now, and that does not include the core mission piece of the request. And I'll touch on that in an upcoming slide. In addition, there are always many good ideas that are raised in the budget process that units bring forward that are critical to their future and the priorities of the university. And there are many good ideas to advance the strategic plans. And there are obviously situations that we need to address when units are facing fiscal challenges for one reason or another. The target ranges here are somewhat lower than we have done in the past several years, but that is because of the resource constraints we believe we are facing. Which, for purposes of this discussion, we've divided those resource drivers into 2 groups. New resources, which would be incremental growth in revenues, and then a repurposing of existing resources. In the first group of incremental growth in resources, we would put the categories of additional state appropriation, tuition, and other. In the following slides, there's a bit more detail on each of these, and I will highlight them for brevity purposes, but then leave the materials here for you to review so we can discuss in the future or answer any questions that you might have. Let me just take a minute to mention other here. I will not talk about it again, but as we mentioned earlier with the pie chart and the different colors of revenue, once in a while, those other revenues do come into play to helping us balance this O&M and tuition framework. An easy example of that actually is if a unit proposes to use increased ICR funds, which again are not in the dark green section, but if they are getting increased ICR funds, those could be available to help offset, because it's unrestricted revenue, help offset cost increases that we otherwise might have to face in the framework. So that is a component, but marginally it's small each year where we're able to take advantage of those revenues. On the state appropriation increase, this table identifies the list of items we requested and the corresponding dollar amounts for FY18 in the blue column, which is the piece relevant for this discussion. And then for FY19, we identified the amounts along with the total in the gray bar at the bottom, just to pull your reference back to that $147.2 million, which is an 11.8% increase over our base. That's the total request. I won't go into the details of these items today since that's not the purpose of this presentation, but it is important to note that the top two items above the bar we have identified as being critical to our goal of minimizing tuition increases. These funds would help support the basic general operating needs of the university and critical services to students, and thus are extremely important to the budget framework and our task to balance the budget for next year. Those items that are below the maroon bar fall more solidly under the strategic investment category of spending that we just discussed. The second major revenue source for the framework is tuition. Our goal for undergraduate resident tuition on all campuses is to minimize any growth as much as possible, and especially for the system campuses, recognizing the unique competitive marketplace in which they compete for students, we would hope to freeze the rates yet again. At this point, if we were to minimize the increase in the Twin Cities resident undergraduate rates to a 2% increase, you can see here how that would compare to what has been done the last 5 years. The average annual increase across this time frame would remain very low at 1.2%. For the system campuses, keeping the increase to 0%, as is our preference, would result in an average annual increase the last 5 years of just 0.3%. For the budget framework, each 1% increase for the Twin Cities campus on the resident undergraduate rate would generate an additional $3.2 million in revenue, and each 1% on the system campuses would generate an additional $3 million. We have similar goals to minimize the increases on the graduate and professional rates. So here, each 1% increase we estimate would generate just under $2 million. For our planning purposes, we don't assume any change in enrollment at this point. We work with each campus and college individually to arrive at an approved tuition revenue estimate to use for budgeting, and in that process, we do factor in all projected changes in enrollment, both up and down. So it's important to remember that although we may be planning to increase freshman enrollment in targeted areas, some of that growth can be offset by projected decreases in the continuing student populations. Graduate programs decrease, for example. We talk through those scenarios with the units before settling on a reasonable tuition estimate. For non-resident, non-reciprocity tuition, our recent goal has been to gradually increase the rates at a faster pace, particularly on the Twin Cities campus, where we would like to move up from the bottom of the Big Ten institutions. You can see here that the rate increases have been in the 5 to 7.5% range the last 4 years, and I can tell you they were in the 6 to 8% range in the 2010 to 2012 time period. This last year was a bit chaotic in the communication of our plans, with our original proposals increasing the rate to the middle of the Big Ten over 4 years, but then we finally settled on an increase of 7.5% with a provision to commit to no more than a 5.5% increase for our continuing students, and that holds for all students that are currently in the Twin Cities campus right now. In that environment, our yield rates decreased, down 1% for Illinois and 1.2% for all other domestic and international, but because applications were up 10%, overall the combined domestic and international NRNR number enrolled increased 2.4% this year. We believe we can continue to raise this rate significantly and maintain the desired geographic diversity if we do so carefully. There is some concern right now because at this point I am told applications are down compared to last year from Illinois and other domestic states by over 15%. Increasing the rate for incoming freshmen by 10% this next fall would mean an increase before any discounting of just over $2,000. That would keep us ranked 13 out of 14 in the Big Ten. Ohio is number 12, and they are $4,314 higher than us this year. So unless they decrease their tuition, we would still be at 13. Moving to the second group of resource options, repurposing resources. Brian was going to
So
speak
this is part of an effort that's been going on for several years, and part of bringing back existing resources and redeploying them rather than just adding incremental resources. And this reallocation comes from various pieces. We meet with all the units. They give us details of how these are coming back. Some may have to come from mission related. We like it to come from mission support or administrative or leadership and oversight in our parlance. But we're increasingly seeing in the budget meetings that they're having to take a hard look at some mission areas as well to meet the targets that we've given them, to meet these targets that we set forth in the Operational Excellence Program.
For the status update on the $90 million, just to close this out, you are familiar with the President's goal to cut administrative expenses by $90 million over 6 years, beginning in FY14. We exceeded the planned $15 million per year for the first 3 years, and I apologize for the spacing on this chart. I'm not sure how it got off, but the $18.8 million is for FY14, 19.6 FY15, and 15.4 was FY16. We correlated a corresponding list of actions taken by unit and reported that to you and to the state as part of the legislative performance measures for FY14 and 16. For FY17, we will achieve roughly $15 million if things go according to plan, which leaves $21.5 million left to accomplish over the next 2 years. Preliminarily, we have targeted $12.5 million for FY18, so that after 5 years, with this assumption, we will have accomplished 90% of our goal. That could change depending on what happens with the other revenue and cost components of the framework over the next month. The primary action in implementing this, as you recall, is impacts positions. Elimination of positions or salary savings from restructuring of positions is the primary source for these revenues, although there's a wide variety of actions that are taken. So in closing,
So this is the last slide to just tell you again, refresh that we're bringing available resources, costs of investments, and this balancing act is what we'll be doing between now and June to bring a balanced budget proposal to the board for your review and approval. We'll obviously have time in May. We'll be able to update you at the May meeting about legislative action and other new information that we'll have that we don't have today, but this gives you the way we're going to approach putting together the operating budget for fiscal year 18. We're happy to take any questions that members of the board may have today.
Thank you, Mr. Burnett and Mr. Tonneson. Questions, comments from the board? Regent Lucas.
Thank you, Chair Johnson. I'm just wondering about applications from overseas foreign students. Is that also down? And how might that impact?
President Kaler.
Mr. Chair, Julie, I actually happen to have that number right in front of me. International applications this year were 5,563. That's down 376 from the year before. But of those applications, we made 1,791 offers of admission, which is 140 more than we made last year, and to date we have 63 international students confirmed, which is one more than we had at this time last year.
Ms. Tonneson, thank you, Mr. President. Ms. Tonneson?
Chair Johnson, and just to add to that, the information I have, the applications for this coming fall from international students are down 5.7% from last year. Where they?
Regent Omari. Thank you, Chair Johnson. I just want to clarify. We made how many more offers to get one more student?
Mr. Chair, Regent Omari, we
President.
made 140 more offers to date, and we have one more student to date. But it's very early.
Right.
April is the month that matters.
Do you have those numbers for NRNR? Have we made more offers? And
Mr. President? Chair, I do. I thought this
like
might
this.
be of interest, so I got these from Bob McMaster just this morning. So NRNR applications, 16,091. That's down 4,164 from the year before. So that's a 20% reduction. We made offers of 7,551. That's down 607 from last year. So far, we have received confirmations from 351 students, which is 90 more than at this point in time last year.
So we made fewer offers?
Fewer offers, and we got a higher yield, yes.
So does that assume that the talent pool went down as well, if we made fewer offers?
It would be, I can hear Bob McMaster now, 200 miles away. It's very early, so it's really hard to interpret what those numbers mean at this point of the game. But it certainly would be encouraging that pool has formed, and given the drop in that number of applications and numbers of offers, would suggest that the application pool is weakening from the bottom rather than the top. But again, way too early to draw conclusions like the one I just did.
Weakening.
Regent Omari?
I'm just trying to process all that information.
Okay,
I'm a little
Regent
slow
McMillan.
Thank you, Chair Johnson. President Kaler, it's only 160 miles, but that's not my point. Can you confirm everything, very seriously, sorry for the humor intercession there, is everything you just walked through for numbers was Twin Cities, correct?
These are Twin Cities numbers only. That's
Thank you.
correct.
Further comments, questions of the presenters? Regent Hsu.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, presenters. I have a couple questions related to the particulars of your presentation. Going back to the utility increase of $1 million, that's, I can't remember what page that is, but maybe you
At
can
$1.05 million.
$1.05 million.
Yes, sir.
On page 200 or page 9 of the presentation. How is that impacted by the new power plant coming online, which I assume is going to happen just before the next fiscal year starts?
Mr. Bertelsen, would you please come forward? Did you hear the question, Mr. Bertelsen?
Mike Bertelsen, the interim VP for University Services, Mr. Chair and Regent. But for the combined heat and power plant coming online, those increases would be larger. So that plant is going to reduce our net utility cost to the institution in total. But so this is a combination of all the utilities, electrical, water, steam, all those things together.
Regent Hsu?
Well, do you know how much it would be for the, if we didn't have the new power plant?
Yes, sir, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Bertelsen?
Approximately $2 million more. The savings for CHP relative to our baseline, CHP is going to reduce our cost approximately $2 million a year from the baseline, from what the projection would have been otherwise.
Okay.
Regent Hsu?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mr. Bertelsen. I've got a couple other questions related mostly to, you made a reference to central reserves, I believe, on the networking upgrade impact, and can you explain how that works? Because it doesn't really say central reserves in the presentation, at least not on the page I was looking at.
Ms. Tonneson?
Mr. Chair, Regent Hsu, how it will come in on that particular slide, it shows it as an increased investment earnings from a new way to invest a portion of the temporary investment pool. And the increased earnings will show up as increased revenue reported in central reserves. And then there will be a corresponding recommendation in the budget to allocate $4 million of those increased earnings to OIT for the purposes of paying for the remainder of this cost over 10 years. So you will see it both as a revenue increase in central reserves in the budget, and then as an increased taking a portion of that and increasing the allocation to OIT.
Regent Hsu?
Thank you. That answers my question. Thank you very much. And then going to tuition, can we see some numbers on what it would actually cost to freeze in-state undergraduate in-state undergraduate tuition, and then have that offset by other forms of tuition, possibly in the NR category? And I'll note that, we've moved up from 14th to 13th, and I guess we're projecting to stay at 13th, which is not really in line with our goal. So maybe if you could show us some analysis that would show what would happen if we made a more aggressive move. And I would also reference the fact that we don't always collect the tuition anyway, because we do give waivers to a significant number of students, which would mean that we could actually raise the tuition more and offset the increase with waivers, but accomplish our goal of getting to the midpoint of the Big Ten sooner.
Ms. Thomas, is that something you want to respond to now, or do some homework and get back to Regent Shu and the
Mr.
Regent?
Chair, members, we will have to compile that and put it, I don't have it here today, so
Okay.
we will have to provide that.
Very good. If you would do that, we'd appreciate it. Very good, thank you. Regent Beeson.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair. Serving on the board for a number of years now, 8 years, it does provide some perspective, and was talking to some of you colleagues the other night about sort of the state of higher education, and it is a, you know, in general it's under great siege, and you could say it's in crisis, but we are, I think we're on the high ground as it relates to our colleagues from around the state, whether it's private, nonprofit, or other publics. So I hope we keep in mind some of the guiding principles that our predecessors made the last 20 years. And that was to create a high value. It wasn't necessarily to be the low cost provider, but the high value proposition. And that came about because of good financial stewardship. And I'll note that we've had this very low, we've really broken the cost increase curve. It's not zero. It's not a reduction, but we're at about a 1 or 2%, and that's not insignificant. They also made the decision to turn this into a research engine, the enterprise, including Duluth, and that comes with a cost. We were down at Cloquet the other day, and we talked about the fact that we want our medical school to be even more productive on research. That's going to take more money. So if we need to increase rates in the Twin Cities undergraduate, I hope we won't, but if we can't see our way to get additional money from the legislature, we may have to increase that. And I think there's some, I think that's the wise decision if it comes to that point, because I would not favor disinvesting on the research side going forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Regent Swigum.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. Mr. Burnett, to your original first pie chart that you gave us,
Yes.
with the 20% of the funds coming from either gifts or endowments, are they all restricted, all 20% of that restricted?
Mr. Burnett.
Thank you, Chair Johnson. Regent Swigum, it's about 95% are. There are some gifts that come with unrestricted. We have some of those that come, and we do have that. We're going to break that down for you after we talked about it at the retreat about endowment income and how much is restricted. But Julie, like 95, 98% of it's restricted.
Mr. Chair, Regent Swigum, yeah, it's an extremely high amount that's restricted, and sometimes the restriction is to a unit, if not to an actual expenditure. So it has to go to the College of Liberal Arts, for example, and can't be used more broadly. So but perhaps it's unrestricted to them. So there are different levels of restriction as well.
So, Mr.
Regent
Chairman,
Swigum.
Mr. Chairman, Julie, the part that might be restricted that you just mentioned to the College of Liberal Arts, is that just to program at Liberal Arts, or would that be to students at Liberal Arts?
Mr. Chair, Regent Swigum, that will depend. Sometimes they might get a gift that is just for their discretion, and they could use for anything that they deem appropriate and of a priority, or they might dedicate it to students in the form of a scholarship for that college, for example. So it depends on the donor's intent. They can restrict it at a very, I mean, we joke about some of the scholarship restrictions that are for, blue-haired, left-handed Norwegians, because sometimes they do get very specific. But sometimes it's just for undergraduate students.
Thank you,
So-
We're blue-eyed, blonde Norwegians.
There's more of those, Mr. Chairman.
Regent Swigum.
And one more question, if I could, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Burnett, or Julie. In regards to the President's effort of the reduction of the $90 million in administrative costs, which I laud you for, Mr. President, and the direction you've gone. You said most of that is done through personnel. which personnel, what type of personnel, and is it mostly through attrition, or have we actually gone out and told somebody they don't have a job?
Ms.
Julie's
Tonneson?
been here for most of it,
Yeah.
all of it.
Mr. Chair, Regent Svegum, it is, in terms of your first question, which types of personnel, to be counted in the 90 million, it has to be personnel that we have defined as administrative, which are all of the support functions as well as the leadership functions. So it would not include faculty, for example, in this particular number, or people who are working in labs and that type of thing. It would be any kind of support personnel, so HR, finance, communications, facilities people, technology people, any of those kinds of positions, as well as leadership. So if we reduce, and we have vice presidential positions or associate VPs, deans, those kinds of positions as well. Those are the types of positions. And I'm just real quick, and you were correct, most of it is through attrition, not 100%. There have been some layoffs over the years, but that is a very small fraction. Most has been through attrition.
Regent Swigum?
And salary savings.
And just to follow up to the first part of the question, thank you for answering the question. So would most of those persons, would I find them in the P&A numbers, or would I find them in the civil service numbers, or where would I find them in the numbers that are no longer there?
Ms. Tonneson?
Mr. Chair, Regent Svegum, both. And I don't today have a percentage breakdown for that, but it would be in both P&A, civil service, and
Okay.
labor represented.
So, Mr. Chairman, I know that you're going to be meeting with myself specifically and with Regent Powell, but we're going to need to do some reconciling, because I also see where the P&A numbers are up about 1,600 in the last years. So we're going to have to reconcile some things for me.
Ms. Tonneson?
Mr. Chair, Regent Svegum, we are happy to provide whatever information you need. It is important to note that we report when a unit makes a decision to eliminate a position in this department, but they need to hire a different position over here for a different purpose because they got a new grant or whatever it might be. We still report the decision to eliminate this one over here, even though all else being equal, there's no change. So,
or an increase.
Or an increase.
Okay, further questions on the budget process?
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Burnett?
Just last, Regent Svigum and Regent Powell, as part of the onboarding process that we'll be getting with you, Regent Beeson, as Chair of Finance, had asked us to put together kind of a summary of the operational excellence in this piece. So we talked about that just yesterday as we were walking around the Duluth campus. And so understand we're going to bring you details about that, but I believe some of those P&A growths have been in the sponsored projects and some of those other types of funds, not necessarily in the O&M piece of the budget, but we'll bring you that detail.
Mr. Chairman, detail and great patience.
We're happy to serve.
Regent Hsu.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. One more question regarding the compensation pools. Last year, we were able to, at the last minute, get a little more granularity in terms of what the pools would be for the various types of employees. And I might add, just for clarification, that just because we're saying that the pool is going to increase by 2%, it doesn't mean that every employee in that pool is going to get a 2% increase. Some will get 0, and some will get some number greater than 2, I assume. I don't know how high we're going and whether or not there's a limit on that, but some employees, I would hope, are warranting larger increases than others, because I don't think everybody's performing at the same rate. So.
Mr. Burnett?
Mr. Chairman, Regent Hsu, President Kaler's made it very clear, and we've made it clear to the units across our system that he expects any salary changes to be merit-based. And so that is with, so the pool, you're right, is an assumption. And so they have to balance within that 2% pool to do maybe above and some below 2 or some at nothing. But it will be a merit-based, and we've had that discussion with the folks who have to make those decisions at the campus level and within our units.
Okay, just a quick follow-up. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Vice President Burnett, or Senior Vice President Burnett, sorry about that. What I'm thinking is that we will be able to give larger increases to people for retention purposes out of that pool, and that's something that we need to be conscious of. But I also want to make the additional point that if we're going to argue that we have to pay market, we should also be charging market for tuition. Okay, and so that means that, you know, we know that our NR&R number is way below market, and I think the sticker price is really the number we should be focusing on.
Further comments, Regent Omari?
Thank you, Chair Johnson. Thank you, Associate Vice President Tonneson and Senior Vice President Burnett. I'm very curious. I'm excited to see these numbers, what it looks like for the NR&R on the Twin Cities campus. I find it hard to believe that a drop of 4,000 applications has nothing to do with the signaling of our increase. So I'm excited to see how we can break that down further. I'm also happy that there's suggested freezes on the system campuses. And one of the things that I think some of us might actually disagree on, but that I cringe every time I see it, and I don't want to tell units how to spend their money, but when we're reallocating, we continue to see student jobs being cut at the same time. And I'm not as interested in the looking at if the total number of student jobs is the same. So then if, you know, science and engineering has 100 and CLA has none, I am more interested in what that distribution looks like across the entire system. But I do think we as a board may want to provide some more direction around whether or not we are willing to allow student jobs to be cut in the reallocation, because it has been happening.
Thank you, Regent Omari. Regent Anderson?
I just had a brief comment. Thank you, Chair Johnson, on Regent Omari's NR&R and a possible explanation. I think we dropped 4,000 applications. We gave 607 less admissions, and 90 more have applied. It may very well be, just briefly, that people who are looking at us just for price did not apply, and we still have the quality student. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you for the presentation and discussion, members of the board.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
The committees did not meet this month, so we have no committee reports. As we conclude, I would like to make a few comments from the chair. And the first is, again, a sincere thank you, Chancellor Black, and to your entire staff, faculty, and students for your hospitality here during our two-day stay at UMD. We began on Wednesday with driving through the beauty of the forests of Cloquet, and we spent the afternoon in our retreat. It was very productive. We also enjoyed time last evening at a very historical place called Glensheen, and engagement of community leaders and staff and faculty, and most appreciative of that. It was interesting and educational for us to go through the poster session with students and faculty and gain an understanding of some of the research projects that are occurring here at UMD. Personally, I thought the briefings that we received in the medical school and the pharmacy was absolutely excellent. It gave us great direction and confidence in the programs here at UMD and the contributions you will make to the betterment of health of people across the land. Goes without saying, this is a beautiful part of the state. It's a productive part of the state, and you have every right, as we are, to be proud of University of Minnesota Duluth here in the great North Country. And our time here has been most appreciative by my fellow board members, President Kaler, and the entire administration. We must keep in mind that our job as administration and regents is to provide the tools and the resources so that faculty, staff, and yes, most importantly, for students. That's what we're about. It's about students. And we are reminded of that each and every time we meet, and that is one of the takeaways that we have from our visit here at Duluth. Finally, I'd like to state this. Over the past several months, the University of Minnesota endured a difficult period in the aftermath of an incident involving a female student and members of the Gopher football team that resulted in a report of sexual assault and subsequent actions by the university. Allegations of sexual assault are serious, and we are committed to ensuring student safety across all our campuses, as well as an appropriate process for all parties involved. When we encounter challenging situations, we must take a step back and learn so that we can do better in the future. Today, I am announcing an independent review to assess the facts and processes related to these recent events and actions. Reporting directly to the board, the university's chief auditor will manage this review at the board's direction. She will engage external experts as needed to clarify and confirm accountability for actions taken and to identify areas of improvement to address matters similar challenges in the future. We anticipate this review will be completed by May 2017. This time, is there any old business to come before the board? Is there any old business? Is there any new business to come before the board? Any new business? If not, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Is there a second? All in favor indicate by saying aye. Opposed? We are adjourned.
Lunch?
Yeah.
No. Yeah. We still want to be.